And we are live. But there's no point doing anything until people show up. If anyone does show up. We have 2 viewers. The first 2 hits. The first thing is, can you hear me? That's pretty important. Am I being heard? Am I being heard? We would like to know, first of all, if you can hear me. Should be seeing comments if that's the case. You see my mouth moving, but can you hear me? There we go. Good afternoon. You are loud and clear. Loud and queer. Loud and queer. I am loud and clear. Definitely not loud and queer. Let's get that out of the way. Straight as a board. 5x5. Hello, where's Wendy? Good to see you. Wild 1957 Flower. You hear me? That's good. Shelly, good to hear you. We're going to test one more thing actually right now. Let's see what we can do about. I want to know if you guys can actually hear the audio when I want to play audio. How do I get that? I can hide that again. We'll go with this as an interest thing, but we'll just play this. Let's see if you hear it when it plays. If it plays. We just need something to play.
396 more than was previously known in the same region from satellite images.
This guy's voice is kind of funny.
Yes, there's a stark difference between LiDAR.
All right, let me know if you heard that. I want to know if you heard that clip. We're not ready for clips yet. That had nothing to do with the show. I just want to know if you heard it. Object Collector says yes. Shelly says still good. Did you hear the clip that I played on YouTube? Yes. Awesome. All right, we got full audio. So how is everybody? What's going on? What do people want to know about? What do people want to ask? E Sharp, good to see you. Hope the weather's better in your neck of the woods. It's been stormy where I am, or it was. About a week ago, it was night after night. It was brutal. And then it went over your way where the radar disappears. So I don't know what happened to you guys over there. John Corey, I'm good, man. Family's all together. Wife's back home after her trip back east. Kids are happy. Everybody's happy. We've been sorting and cleaning the last few days, spending a bunch of time together. Putting the smile back on her face has been kind of my priority, but you know, the world's an eventful place, and it's not going to wait for me to get back to work. I mean, a lot has happened, but at the same time, over the last 3 weeks, what has really changed? It's been Groundhog Day. Every day you wake up, it's one narrative. By the time you go to bed, it's a different narrative, and that just keeps going all week. The weekend comes, there's a narrative on Friday, then there's a narrative on Saturday, then there's a narrative on Sunday, generally before markets open. We're essentially in the exact same spot, a quagmire. The 24 to 48 hour war is now 155 days old. Do you feel communism breathing down our neck in Canada for years now? I don't know. That's a tough one. It really is a tough one because somebody asked me, Jed, actually, and I wonder if he's going to show up and chime in on the stream, but he asked me, is this a glass half full or glass half empty video he was talking about yesterday's? There's a lot worse places to be in the world than Canada. And I know it seems dark, and I know I report on a lot of the darkness. You know, we've particularly up until a year and a half ago, it was getting much darker. I mean, mass immigration was flooding the place. Crime was out of control, still out of control, don't get me wrong. But I do see glimmers that they're trying to do something about it. Huge busts of precursor materials coming in from China and huge busts when it comes to cocaine trafficking. Massive gangs of sings that are being busted and put behind bars, and there's bail reform that's actually going to keep the violent offenders in jail so that somebody who stabs somebody in the morning isn't released later that afternoon to stab again. These are positive developments, and we kind of have to count them. There's a lot worse places to be in the world, but at the same time, nothing else I've ever said is untrue. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is a paper document that can be suspended at the will of the government. The government itself is not the people you elect. It's the people you elect appoint. And they know who they're going to appoint before they even get to run an election before they're nominated. They know what their marching orders are. The real power is the governor general. The real power is the cabinet. The real power is the prime minister, who has been parachuted in for God knows what purpose. I mean, on the surface, it looks like he's just here to, and I mean, this is the general gist of what Carney's doing. He's here to manage Canada for the benefit of the financial class. The difference between me and maybe other commentators is I can see that, especially now, Trump is a part of that financial class. He's part of that order. I think that he and Carney are a lot closer than public optics would make you think. I see it in the comments section. People are, putting down their Promethean action and Promethean updates, and we need to watch them and listen to them. I think it's an intelligence operation. I think it's meant to distract from what's really going on. And I think that, what speaks louder? Prince Charles coming and staying in Washington for, 4 days and 3 nights? Him and Trump glad-handing? I'm supposed to believe that I'm not supposed to believe at the surface level what Trump says, but in the next breath, I'm told I need to believe everything he says, even if he goes from ending Iranian civilization yesterday morning to, I don't want to say taco because people get upset about that word, even though it's a pretty accurate acronym. His behavior over the last several months required an acronym to actually explain it, and the internet provided one. People don't like it. They think it's too low class, even though if you read Trump's Truth Social, he's incredibly low class in his communications, and taco is mild to the max. Once again, he said, we're going to effing hit, we're going to hit them so effing hard. We're going to knock the effing shit out of them, or whatever it was he said. Something to that effect. And then he says, I'm going to give diplomacy a chance. He was put under massive pressure. Let's just start there. Put under massive pressure by Saudi Arabia. They essentially would say to him, if you do this, Iran's going to hit us. They're going to blow up Aramco. The Houthis, we call them Houthis. It's actually, I believe it's Ansar Allah, but we'll call them Houthis because that's common parlance. The damage they did in one day to Saudi Arabia really scared them, to the point where they might have to get actively involved in a ground operation to try and stop them. It won't work. Nobody's been able to stop them for the last decade. Nothing's going to stop them now. It's kind of crazy that we think we can without coming to some kind of arrangement. There's so much. It's like as my thoughts coalesce and as I want to try and communicate them, they just jump all over the place. From the problem with Saudi Arabia and the Houthis, you have to go back to Sykes-Picot that created all of these fake political units that we know as the Middle East, and is currently, I believe, falling apart before our eyes. I don't think the Middle East is going to look the same in the next 10 years as it has for the last, since Sykes-Picot was agreed to. At any rate, I think the Saudis would have said to Trump, look, if you do this, they're going to hit Saudi Aramco. And in order to repair that, in order to pay for it, because their GDP is, their economic activity has already shrunk by 5% since the start of this war. That's $1 in every $20 disappeared. And I think they said, we're going to sell treasuries to make sure that we survive. And right now, bond yields are at a very high rate, to the point where the United States is looking, I'm looking ahead to 2029, 2030, when Social Security fails, when Medicare fails. They're looking at insolvency. If we want to look right now, I just got to find it. We'll go to our debt clock. Actually, I was just looking at this morning. So there's your gross federal tax revenue, $5.5 trillion, and there's your interest on debt. 20% of federal income is going to just the interest. That's $1 out of every $5. Everybody talks about the tragic economic situation of Canada. Well, the United States is broke too. And if the Saudis threaten to sell treasuries, that's probably enough to get Trump's attention for at least a little while, maybe a week or two, but I don't think the war is over by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think it's over by a long shot. I think Trump's in a really bad pickle. And I think he was very wise when he at first indicated that he was going to stay out of this conflict, that he didn't want anything to do with a war in Iran. It was really smart and astute. Those were the ideas, and that was the position he advocated, a position I supported and still support. He's the one that changed, not me. People will say I've got TDS. I'm just dedicated to the ideas. I'm not dedicated to the man. And anyway, that's a long answer to a simple question. That gets us started. Let's see. I'm going to scroll backwards. Good day, Frank and friends. Just sitting here wishing treason was taken seriously. Sure, but it's not. I mean, as long as it's the financial class, as long as it's the power class that's doing it, doesn't matter. There's one set of rules for you and one set of rules for them. And that is very clear here in Canada. We're subjects to the crown. Sound good in BC? That's good. A week ago, Saturday, big thunderstorm. Yeah, man. Yeah, it was pretty wild. Really wild. There was one point I actually had the kids all huddled together in a room, which I thought was safe because apparently there were tornadoes all around. And so they were camped out. They were passed out. I had fans on a battery pack so that they wouldn't hear the power go out if it went out. And I kept peeking out the window and everything was calm. Everything was calm. Everything was calm. And then I looked out the window because I could hear the rain falling. I could hear the wind blowing. I looked out the window and I couldn't see 2 feet out the window. It was just mist because the wind was vaporizing that rain as it was coming down. And I just kind of closed the window and I waited it out. And it actually wasn't that bad, but it got a lot worse as it tracked east of me. It got way worse. So we were kind of lucky on that one. And there's the question I answered. Do you feel communism breathing down our neck? It's a tough one because on the surface, it's a yes. But I don't know if it's communism in the way that we have thought about communism. It's more like a creeping totalitarianism of the financial class. It's like a socialism of the crony capitalist, but I don't even like doing that. Like I'm reading a book on the history of capitalism right now. And I'm quite enjoying it, actually. You know, the roots of capitalism go back to Asia. It's not a European thing. People think it's a European thing. It's the first traders and the first merchants who focused on building capital so that they could amplify capital and capital alone and not just subsistence agriculture or engaging in crafting and then trading that for subsistence. These were people who just wanted to accumulate capital. The roots were Aden and India and Hormuz and like that whole Indian Ocean. But the more you come to understand capitalism as it was, the more you understand that what we have now is it's not really capitalism. It's not really a free market. Hey, Frank. Don B says, hey, Frank. Exactly. Isn't it all the spin in Canada actually treason? Hello, chat, says Ray. DEI is Maoist Marxism. DEI is just there are good. No. I think there are weak people who are well-meaning, who want to use state power to create the world of ideals that they have been taught is possible through their very expensive university educations and their liberal arts degrees and their sociology degrees and their gender studies degrees. Living in a state of cognitive dissonance and even cognitive disassociation. And in order to make the world comport to how they feel it should be, they would like to use state power to essentially overrule the natural order, to compel people to live in a way that suits how they would see the world. But I would say they would never be happy. DEI, the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusivity, dare I say, like there is a positive aspect to it. There's this idea that, and the positive aspect is not what it, even though homeless have smartphones in Canada. Yeah, it's never been a better time to be homeless. I mean, but really, when you think about it, do you want to live on the street addicted? Do you want to? A lot of these people, though they choose to be there, their lives are miserable. Like I wouldn't want their life. You give me all the smartphone welfare in the world, like the absolute crushing, crippling lack of meaning that life entails. That's why it used to be stigmatized. You know, if that's how you wanted to behave, if that's how you wanted to conduct yourself, you could expect people to ostracize you and reject you. And I think we need to get back to that. I mean, if you're a meth head and that's all you want to do with your life, you should be ostracized for that. People should treat you bad for making that choice until you make better choices. I think social enforcement was far more effective in the past when we had it. I remember growing up in the 1990s, social enforcement kept a lot of people in line, including myself. And now we've said we can't do that anymore. Another aspect of DEI that I really hate is this. I keep hearing stories of kids in public school, and it weighs on me. We homeschool, and there's reasons we homeschool, and this would be one of them. But that the only way to get attention in class anymore is if you're one of the kids that's screaming and yelling and hucking desks at the teacher. Those are the kids that get all the attention. When I was in school, and this is just, these are bad behaviors, but it could also be people who have mental health issues and are disadvantaged. You're not even supposed to say they're disadvantaged. Somebody with mental health issues that are permanent, you're not even supposed to acknowledge that they're disadvantaged anymore. You're supposed to just pretend they're normal when they're not normal. Everybody gets jammed into the same classroom, and it distracts and destroys the ability of everybody else to learn because all of the attention is being soaked up by the outlier. That's such a tragedy, and that's a tragedy of DEI. One lone Canadian can't wind this war back now, and the markets and supply chains have yet to take a hit. Yeah, I mean, we're getting real close. We're getting real close to it actually biting. Trump said something very honest weeks back when the MOU was announced, which was just nonsense. The same as it's nonsense today. I mean, this idea that we're so close to a deal, he's doing the same thing he's been doing for months. And the Iranians came out, actually, let's head over to the browser for a minute. There's an article. Here, the Times of India. Iran denies deal to reopen Strait of Hormuz, says route closed as long as U.S. hostile actions continue. So the Iranians have been, whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter if you like them, they have been very consistent when it comes to what their red lines are and what their issues are. They've been very forthcoming and very straightforward. And when they say they're going to do a thing, they do it. Like, as opposed to the United States and as opposed to Trump's leadership, who has done a lot of damage to the value of U.S. diplomacy in the world. When you can't trust him from the morning to the afternoon, it's tough. I'm not saying this because I hate the guy. I'm not saying this because I got Trump derangement syndrome. I'm saying this because that's reality. It's not a good look. And reality is the Iranians have been clear all along. They view the blockade as a hostile action. So every time the U.S., which they're still doing today, interdicts against a ship, that's for them. They're saying there's no negotiation as long as there's a blockade. And they're saying it here. They have been mocking Trump all day, saying that everything he said about them begging for a deal is not true. Why? Because it's not true. It's never been true. Trump is making things up, and people say it's the art of the deal. They say it's how he gets attention. I think it just looks terrible. And I don't like saying that. It gives me no joy. There's a lot about the Trump domestic agenda. My vision, my dream for the United States this time round was that the empire, which, see, I made the argument back in 2015 and 2016. You are not picking a leader to save the American empire. You are now picking leaders who are going to guide its reorganization and its decline. It's not a matter of how to build it back up. It's a matter of how to wind it down and reorganize it and emerge more powerful on the other side of the fourth turning. So my hope, after 8 years of drama between 16 and 24, was that on the way back in, it would be recognized that the United States had to draw itself out of the Middle East peaceably, that it had to get itself extricated from the Ukraine war peaceably, that it had to renegotiate the idea of NATO and concentrate on what is most important, which is being lost, and that is Fortress North America. This idea that all of these issues, the Israelis, the Arabs, The issues in Eastern Europe have nothing to do with North America. This is a great big continent. It's already an empire without any external territories. It's the biggest empire just on the face of it that anybody could ever want. It has everything you could ever want. Focus on this, focus on defending this, focus on building it back up because the infrastructure in the United States is crumbling. It could use so much of its own resources. It's dwindling labor because they have the same birth rate problems as everybody else. Like we're in a time where demographic pressure, economic pressure, bad money since 1971 with the decline of Bretton Woods coming off the gold standard, the printing of money, GDP is quadrupled, while the supply of money in all of its forms it's something like 30 or 40 times. It's way outpaced GDP growth. That's why everybody feels like they're being robbed. That's why the bridges are crumbling. That's why the inner city's rotten, because it's all been stolen through the magic of printing money and inflation. And I really believe that this time round, you had a chance that the empire would redraw its lines and start focusing on domestic issues exclusively and deal with those things, because that was the campaign. Those were the ideas expressed. In addition to that we would see justice when it came to Epstein and justice when it came to the Clintons. None of that materialized. All of it went away. And now, and I think it's so incredibly important to understand the symbolism of historic cycles. The current reigning hegemon, and you could argue that it's not a hegemon. I've done that myself. But the current reigning hegemon, we'll just call it what it is, just like Rome and just like many other powers, has gone into Persia to bury itself. That's where empires go to die. And it was a completely avoidable war. All the narratives about weapons of mass destruction and Iranians can't have nuclear weapons. We can't have the Shiite death cult having nuclear weapons. I mean, the Pakistanis already have them. The Third Temple extremists already have access to them in Israel. They have to fight elections, mind you. But that's a death cult too. I mean, we talk about the Shiite death cult, but we don't talk about the Third Temple, the whole Third Temple advocacy from the evangelists and those Zionists who espouse it. They want to trigger Armageddon too. They want to trigger the end of the world. It's the only way they get their Messiah. To me, that's a death cult, just the same as the other side. All of it has nothing to do with me, and I've been saying that for a long time. I live in North America. We have an empire. We should be working with the United States and getting together and dealing with this, and forget all that. Bring everybody home, save all that money, cure that deficit problem where $1 in $5 is disappearing into the Federal Reserve's black hole. But I don't know. He changed his trajectory. He changed what he set out to do. He abandoned the ideas that he espoused on the campaign trail. But somehow I'm the bad guy because I'm still stuck on the ideas, which is what I'm all about. You could put me in a room sitting down at a table with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump and Mark Carney and all of these guys, Tucker Carlson, Mario Nawfal, stick me at a table with all of them. I just see a bunch of dudes that all got to go to the can in the morning and drop a deuce. We're all the same. We all bleed the same. We're all just people trying to navigate this world. I don't have the starstruck awe. I don't have the sense of seeking a hero anymore. I just want to solve problems. And the only way you solve problems is by having good ideas and then implementing those good ideas. And there were a lot of good ideas. And we're losing them all in real time because of this stupid war in Iran, which is not over. It's just delayed for a little while because this has happened before. When Trump had threatened to end civilization, I think it was the first time, might have been the second time, but the Saudis and the GCC intervened there and they managed to prevail upon him. No, you see, there's so many episodes of this back and forth. I have to actually go right back to February 27th. There's the 26th or 27th of February, when the GCC countries and the Saudis came along and they said, don't do this. Don't bomb Iran. It's going to be bad for all of us. And at that time, he blinked. But by the 28th, he decided to go ahead with it anyway for various reasons. But this is what I'm saying. You got a guy who can be swayed by the Saudis in this instance yesterday, threatening to sell U.S. treasuries to repair any damage that might happen to Saudi Aramco. That dissuades him from a bombing campaign today. But it may not be what dissuades him tomorrow. Tomorrow, it might be another set of circumstances. Remember, Netanyahu came to Washington and was very happy with coming out of the meeting. He looked very happy to me. He had nothing but praise. So there's something very detailed on the table. And I tend to believe that what the Israelis want in order to participate this time around is they're saying to the Trump administration, if we do it this time, we want a commitment that you're going to go all the way and that we're going to meet both of our war objectives. And we need you to say so in public. And rightly so, I think Trump is a little cold to that idea. And which is why we're having this wishy-washy back and forth stuff. I mean, thankfully, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that he didn't proceed with bombing energy infrastructure, because the Iranians will do the same in kind, and that will just tank everything worse than it's already going to tank, because I think it's all baked in. The tanking is already baked in. The insolvency of the United States is already baked in. I don't think there's any avoiding it at this point. People think he can just do some kind of Jassara and Nassara magic. People use those terms still in 2026. Or he can just announce the creation of a gold-backed treasury or gold-backed bond, and that by the magic of doing that, he's going to create a situation where there's all this new money and the debt's not going to matter. If that happens, sure, it might be part of a solution, but everybody still gets wiped out. Social Security still gets wiped out. Medicare still gets wiped out. Medicaid still gets wiped out. The stock market still suffers. The impending crash, the problem with inflationary money printing, all of it still comes due, and the average person still gets wrecked. There is no waving a magic wand and it all goes away. But what we can do is we can make the situation worse for everybody, which is what I think the entire world, not just the United States, but the Western world is engaged in, is just making it worse. I got to read some more comments. This is supposed to be talking to you guys, and I'm just going off. Fact is, we should have little faith in any politician. Bromsley said, you should have no faith in politicians. No faith for men. Trust and reason for men. Faith for God the Father alone. If you're going to have faith at all, put it up there. Don't put it in men. Reason for men. Purpose to enforce WF ideology. Sith Emperor Schwab has been in Canada for decades. He's been everywhere. 15 is my check-in number. Hello, Frank Vaughan. 16 Celsius here in Western Alberta. That's how I know you're real. Unless the bots have been programmed to give weather reports now. Although I know your name. This guy, he gets it. The first line in the charter tells you that the document isn't a guarantee of anything. That's right. It is subject to government approval. All rights flow from the government, not from divinity. That's not, and I've always said the Constitution's better. The United States has a better system. Sure, it's corrupted. Politicians, APACs bought everybody. It's bad. It has its own set of problems, but the Constitution functions still to this day for a lot of people in a way that the charter cannot function. And sure, the courts have put limits on the Constitution, and sure, total information awareness is still a thing in the United States. Palantir is still in the administration. They're going for the full surveillance state. The only difference being is that it's going to be American grown, and so I guess it's better. But I would still take my chances under the Constitution, where at least in theory that your rights descend from the divine, rather than the charter, which says the government gives you these rights, but we reserve the right to take them back. And if we're found to have wrongly taken them back, nothing happens to us. No one's ever held accountable. That son of a bitch Trudeau is on a beach drinking beers with Kate Perry, having the time of his life after he wrecked this country. I was critical of Stephen Harper, and I can go through all that again, but no one's ever been worse for this country than Trudeau, not even his father. The trajectory change that he set us on, Justin Trudeau, is something I'm not sure we can ever recover from. They had to send Carney in to tap the brakes on it. It was so bad. And he did. It's not that I'm saying every time I talk about Carney and I talk about bail reform, or I talk about the fact that he's reducing temporary foreign workers, and he's capping permanent residency, and he's doing these things. Like, it's nibbling around the edges. It's like he's trying to gain control on something that Justin Trudeau sent out of control. It's not that I'm not saying positive things. I'm not becoming a Carney bot. I'm just saying it was so bad they had to send a manager in to try and bring it back, or at least restore it to order. Because the thing is, if all that's left is to rule over the ashes, what's the point for the elite? They need people to clean their toilets. They need plebs to constantly feed up the pyramid chain. If you destroy everything, if you make it so you can't get the resources out of the ground because the country's so chaotic, if you make it so every single inner city is filled with nothing but addiction, that's not just a Canadian problem, that's an American problem too, then there's no point. You have to have order in order to be able to extract the wealth of the people. In order to have serfs, you have to have conditions that are favorable to serfdom. There has to be a certain amount of order. We need to look after our own backyard first. We do. So Carney is a brother from another mother to Trump. I'm not saying that. I'm saying his money is parked in the United States. His life was built in the United States. Brookfield makes money when America and Canada get along and integrate. They don't make money from a divorce. That's what I'm saying. So the elbows up stuff is fodder for mass consumption. It's to keep all of the red machines, hypnotized masses in line. This conflict, you resurrect it every now and again. You send Doug Ford out to say something stupid to get everybody whipped up again. And it works for a lot of this country, millions of people in this country. It works. But behind the scenes or underneath things, if you interpret actions, what do I see? I see a federal government that is now concerned with keeping violent offenders off the streets, at least to a degree. I see a federal government that is, we don't talk about the fentanyl czar anymore, but you're seeing more and more busts. You're seeing the criminal networks be busted up. You're seeing them crack down on certain components of immigration. You're seeing the TFW program with the brakes put on it. They're not announcing these. You're seeing Mark Carney cutting the public service in 3 years by 15%. WTF? Why aren't the unions up in arms? Why aren't they calling out austerity? And I know we're running a deficit, and I know it's like $100 billion this year. Totally get it. We're still spending on ridiculous things like gender equitable clothing development in Vietnam. Like, we're doing all sorts of stupid things. But when it came to crypto regulation, our regulation is looking to the United States to mirror it. Like, I wonder how much of the conflict with the United States is just for public consumption. Because Carney's pocketbook and his entire life is pro-American. That's just how it is. His new Canadian patriotism may be a useful tool. You know, I was thinking last night, I was actually, I don't know where I was sitting. Doesn't matter. You guys don't know my house anyway. I was sitting somewhere in the house. I was reading, and I was thinking about the Boer War. And I was thinking about how, I'm going to botch the names. I believe one name was Schmutz. But there was this drama, this high drama, where somebody who was pro-Uitlander became pro-British, but as from their position of pro-British advocacy, pro-Uitlander, I'm getting it all wrong. I'd have to go back and look at it. It was on my mind last night, and I was mulling it over, and instead of trying to name everybody, you had Cecil Rhodes and you had Milner. Rhodes was discredited, and Milner had to be parachuted in. But there was somebody, I want to say the name was Smuts, but they were parachuted in to represent the Uitlanders or the Boers. But their advocacy, the end result of their actions, not so much their words, was to inflame the conflict before the Boer War got set off. And so they were in there as a patriot for the Boers. But their words and their actions ended up inflaming and leading to the British having the war that they wanted. So I'm botching my remembrance of that. I had much clearer thoughts on it last night, but the bottom line is that you can have somebody come into Canada and claim to be completely for Canada and pro-Canadian and nationalistic and can use this jingoistic language, but their actual objective is further integration, is to actually weaken Canada for integration into some other structure. And the way that you can discern whether or not that's happening is, are the actions the government is taking, are they in line with what the Americans are trying to do domestically? And on several points, the answer is yes. When it comes to busting drug traffickers, or when it comes to actually trying to block the importation of precursor chemicals through our open ports, there's alignment building, cutting the public service, weakening the structure of government. Not that I'm against that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here lamenting the cuts in the public service. Far from it. But this is something that gets no copy, gets no press. Nobody's asking questions as to why Carney, after not campaigning on it, is engaging in austerity, and why liberals, who would be foaming at the mouth if it was a conservative government that was cutting the public sector, are saying nothing. Like, I think we're all being played. Smashing heart for a great content creator. Thank you. I appreciate that. Diplomacy is fake news to the West. They're all the enemy. Never was the black pill more undeniable. And now, you, buddy. When I watch Daniel Smith stand there with Mark Carney doing a press conference and she's just being a bobblehead in the background, nodding yes to everything he's saying, when she's saying, she's lamenting the fact that there's only 4,600 permanent residence positions for Alberta and she wants something like 10 times that number. I have to wonder. The UCP membership in Alberta, they're very clear about what they want. They don't want mass immigration. That's not what they want. They want more autonomy. They got a problem with Ottawa. They make it clear all the time. And the leaders cater to that membership. And then when they become leaders, all of a sudden they become part of the same system. Like, Daniel Smith is such a disappointment at this stage. And so now, rightly so, the UCP membership is talking about how she has to go. And I think they're right, but how the hell do you make sure that the next person that comes in the door doesn't do the same trick? Pierre Poilievre loses his seat in Carleton, has the audacity to go to Alberta, take the strongest riding away given from the incumbent, and is elected in a by-election, and then spends the entire time talking about why the Albertans need to engage with Stockholm Syndrome and stick with Canada. Because the alternative would be so much worse. I mean, it'd be so bad if we had a Western Republic. So terrible. Brett Wilson is out there now telling everybody we got to stay in Canada. Brett Wilson, somebody that I happen to have personal knowledge, was considering separation maybe 5 years ago, 4 years ago. Everybody was getting really frustrated out there and we're talking about putting something together. Now all of a sudden he's telling everybody they got to stay in Canada. Look, and even if the referendum, it's not a referendum. It's basically just a question as to whether or not you want to seek independence. If you vote yes on it, nothing's going to happen. It's going to strengthen. It's going to move things forward. It would potentially strengthen the UCP's hand if they had leadership who understood this to go to Ottawa and negotiate a better deal. Or if the deal can't be had, if you can't negotiate a better position, then you can move the ball forward the next step, because it's a long road to get there. At least in typical times, which we're still kind of living in right now. I don't know for how much longer. But no, instead of strengthening the position, everybody's uniting around this concept of Canada, where the charter doesn't work, where you don't have actual rights. You don't even have fake property rights. They left it out of the charter on purpose because the objective is to keep people under, all of the things about Canada that are cool. I was thinking about it the other day. TFSAs, for instance. You work your whole life. You can stick I think it's 109,000 or 107,000 total you can put in your TFSA. I don't have one. But you can put it in there and you can invest it how you see fit, and you can make gains, and none of those gains are ever taxed. None of the dividends are taxed. And that's in perpetuity. If you turn that $100,000 into millions of dollars, there's no cap gains. You can reinvest it. If you can get your portfolio up to $1 million or $2 million and you're making 15% dividends somehow by some magic and you're pulling in $30,000 a year in dividend payments, that's cool. Totally tax free. That's pretty awesome. TFSA is a decent vehicle, you know. But things like that, when I can think about the positive things that I can say about Canada, they only exist because our leadership allowed some crumbs to fall from the table. It's by their grace that the plebs down here get anything. And that sucks. You can't pull them down. You can't recall your MP. You can't take out a cabinet minister in terms of removing them from the job. You have no control over your justices and your judges. You can't advance citizen-led initiatives that will put on the ballot new bills that could become law if enough people, just bypassing Parliament altogether, citizen initiatives that can create laws. The United States has them. We don't. And it's terrible. All of the good things that I could think to say only exist because of the grace of government. I don't think in 2026 that's any way for people to live, by the grace of the monarch. Frank, man, I missed your work. Ukraine, do you think they will get the crops finished and out? Buddy, I don't know, man. Yes, I do. But I don't know if it's going to matter. Europe's in a bad way because of the drought. Their production's going to be down. There's a very distinct possibility that things do go wrong in Ukraine and it doesn't happen. We have a fertilizer shortage because of this stupid war in Iran, which is going to reduce yields. I think we're okay up here. My fears of mass crop failures because of late plantings. I mean, I'm driving around everywhere I've driven around this province in the last few weeks. Crops are looking great, and there's still lots of time left in the season. That just because it looks good here. It's the same with aviation fuel. You know, I was thinking about that with my wife being away, you know, and I was really nervous because the bombing campaign had resumed, and I'm just like, oh, what happens if they ground the flights, if there's some kind of terrorist attack? You know, you spiral thinking about the possibilities. But Canada does manufacture most of our aviation fuel. So before our domestic traffic is grounded, you should see European traffic grind to a halt, not just cancellations, but grounded. The Russians are experiencing some shortages. And of course, there's all kinds of brown people in countries nobody cares about who are suffering through shortages right now, from the Philippines to Bangladesh to India. There's tightness in the market, but we're not to the fall yet. I think some kind of famine's baked in. I think Ukraine might surprise. They might get their crops finished and they might surprise, but it's one drop in a bucket, right? And the bucket's got holes all over the place. So I don't know if it's going to be I actually don't think there's any way that we can save ourselves from a food crisis at this point. Hope I'm wrong. But with my farmer's eyes and my mind for mathematics, the math ain't mathin'. It won't be long before leadership that remains in Iran is just a bunch of teenagers. That's a good talking point. Sounds good, but it's not actually true. They killed off a few hundred leaders. But several of the leaders that are currently in power were there before the war began. There is continuity of leadership. They have a constitution, and the constitution is functioning. Even if Mushtaba's dead, and I do wonder if the man is dead and it's just a cardboard cutout that somebody in the government is writing statements for, it doesn't matter. Now, the Iranian people are united around their government in a way that wasn't possible before the war began. And it wouldn't matter how many of their leaders you kill at this point. Because to them, to the people, it is an existential war. And I think the West fails to understand what that means the same way that we failed to understand what it meant in Vietnam. To them, it was a war of independence, and they would have fought everybody until they got it. They fought the French. They fought the Chinese for 1,000 years. They fought the Americans and kicked them out. It's the same with Iran. We're not understanding their perspective on this. Not even we, but Mossad and the CIA armed those protesters. They fomented a rebellion. They went into the street. They all got shot dead because the promised help never materialized. They were left to die. I don't believe it was 30,000. The most reliable number I've got is 7,000. Laura Loomer's up to 120,000 now. Her number just keeps growing. And 7,000 is enough on its own. But when they were abandoned and they were killed, that was the seed of any revolution that might have happened. They're dead now because they were abandoned by the Americans. And after killing Mushtaba's dad, his wife, his fucking daughter, pardon my French, killing off so much of his family, even if he is dead, they martyred a man who would have been dead anyway. Rumor has it, at least my understanding is that the late Ayatollah was on death's door anyway with cancer. They could have just let him die of natural causes. Instead, they martyred the man. They united the country. And I don't think it matters. It won't be a bunch of teenagers because it's not a bunch of teenagers today. A lot of the old leadership survived. That's one big myth. Arachi, Zheshkian, these were all, and many other names, the head of the IRGC, they killed some leadership. I know Trump likes to say, we killed one set of leadership, and then we killed another, and then we killed another, and he likes to say these things, but there's a seed of truth to what he says, but he's an exaggerator. He's a bullshitter. Just like he's a bullshitter about America's ability to absolutely wipe them out, short of nuclear. If they want to go nuclear, they can do the job. But they can't win the war conventionally. They can't win it from the air. And the United States can't field 700,000 or 500,000 troops anymore. They can't do a Gulf storm. They can't invade with 500,000 men. They don't have the capacity. They got like 12,000 people in theater, which means in reality, they have a few thousand Marines that can cycle shifts to do anything. It ain't enough. Iran's a country of 93 million people. It's 4 times the size of Iraq, and it's one great, big, huge mountain. You're not beating it from the air. No air campaign in the history of the world has ever worked. You look at what the Allies did to the Germans. Firebombing Dresden, Frankfurt, Heidelberg, all the cities and the massacres and the mass death of the civilian population, and it only, even at that late stage, the casualty rate on the Allied side was huge, but the Germans didn't lay down their arms. Air campaigns don't work, and they were surrounded by ground troops. They fought to the end. It's like, I don't know if political leaders bother to study history. Because if they did, they wouldn't make these mistakes. They would know that their plan isn't going to work. Frank, do you support Alberta separation? Yes. I certainly do. I was booted for my last comment. Should I expect a knock at the door? No, not from me. I don't know. I'm so far behind on the comments. I guess I just got to skip a bunch. Let's see. Oh, wait, I saw TDS somewhere. If we didn't go into Ukraine, we wouldn't be in Iran. TDS is strong on the weak-minded. If we didn't go into Ukraine, we wouldn't be in Iran. TDS is strong on the weak-minded. I don't even understand that comment. Money printing, wasteful spending, and mass migration is what will kill us. Yeah. The lack of, it's an interest. So sound money. Might actually, the lack of sound money, the full embracement of the Cantillon effect as monetary policy, you might be able to trace that to every social rot that we face, from drug addiction to the decline of family, to the purposelessness of men feeling like they have no purpose in the world. to the decline of traditional roles, the lack of empathy in society, violence. There's a case to be made that you can trace it. You can trace the roots of all of those things back to the end of Bretton Woods in 1971 and the embracement of full on fiat currency. Because when they print, they give all the money to their friends. Their friends have the benefit of all the purchasing power because they get to decide where that money enters the market. And 2 or 3 years later, that new money finally reaches the plebs. And at that point, it's not worth what it was when it was printed. And so people do the math. Once you start to understand these things, and hardworking people tend to think about these things, like people who are actually serious about their lives, want a house, they want a family, they want to make these plans. They understand that their purchasing power, or the purchasing power of a human being, the purchasing power of their fathers and their grandfathers was far greater, even though numerically speaking, their father and their grandfather made a lot less money in terms of sheer unit power. But somebody making 100 or 120,000 in today's world can't really afford to carry a family on their own, can't really afford the house and the mortgage payments. And that disincentivizes you from wanting to trade your time and your labor for money that has diminishing purchasing power. So, yes, to that. So great to see you live, Frank. Great way to spend a Sunday afternoon. Stay well, sir. I do the best I can. Jay Cummings, I do the best I can. I want to get healthy. I want to stay on this side of the sod for as long as possible. I like living life. And I want to chase the truth. That's my whole thing. Canada should be an energy superpower. We have 10x the resources of Saudi Arabia. 100%. 100%. There's nothing I can add to that. We have that ability. We have everything we could possibly need. And then when you combine it with the United States, when you combine it with their economy and their ability to produce food, timber, production, manpower, North America is everything. North America is everything. I see it being squandered in the Zagros Mountains. CPC is weak, and Pierre won't be much different. He wants direct flights to Amritsar, India. Wants more Durkas. Yeah, he's a mass immigration advocate. He wants more war with Ukraine. He thinks that Canada should be involved in Iran in a greater capacity. I mean, it's, yeah, very disappointing. That's why he can't win. Good to see you, Frank. Warm regards to you and your family. Same to you. Greta, the other one, same to you. You've been around. You've been with me for a while for many different things. Good afternoon, Frank. Hey, Peter. Good to see you, man. Glad to hear your family is whole again. Me too, man. All I did was pray for their safe return, and we're back together. And I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to do what you got to do when it's a team. I had all these plans for while she was gone. She was going to come home and everything was going to be done, you know. Some flooring I was going to lay in the laundry room that I bought a couple of years ago. I still haven't got that job done. I had all these plans, and I'll tell you, when you're giving your attention to your kids who are really missing their mom, you're keeping them busy. You're cooking 3 squares a day. You're cleaning up. You're keeping everybody focused. It's hard to get things done sometimes. I tried to do more reading while she was gone. You know, the kids would be playing or whatever, and I'd pull out my book and I would try to study. Whew. Impossible. Can't do it. A lot of distractions. And I tell you, every time I open that book, some kid would come along with a question. You see, I'm not the kind of parent that I don't just tell them to go off and leave me alone. You know, and it's not like I don't take time for myself and do the things that I need to do, but when they've got questions and they're exploring their world and they're trying to learn about their world and they have something they want from me informationally, even if I want to do something else, I put my needs aside and I answer their questions. Like the other night, or last night actually, there's a game. I play it on the computer out there. It's Civilization 4. And I haven't played 5, I haven't played 6, I haven't played 7 too much. I've tried maybe to play them, but, like, I haven't really gotten into it. Civ 4 is just kinda where I'm at, and when Civ 4 was current, that was kinda when I was last, like, really into gaming like that. Anyway, I remember how to play it, so while I'm playing it, I come across on one of the tiles, there's rice, and Junior asked me, like, "What's that tile?" I said, "It's rice," and it's an old game, so it's a pixelated whatever, and he's like, "That's what rice looks like?" And I said, "Yeah." So you alt tab out, you go to YouTube, and you watch a documentary on rice production. Well, that whole process takes 20, 25 minutes. But now my son understands rice in a way that maybe I didn't even understand. And that's kind of how things flow. They ask questions and you answer those questions and you try to answer those questions thoroughly. You try to give them an education in that answer. And just the only way that I can do what I do back here and I can do the work that I want to do, because this to me is my work, as if my partner's here, as if my wife's around, because then she can answer their questions and she can look after them, and I don't feel like they're being neglected. And I'll tell you, it was a 2.5 week lesson in just not that I needed a reminder, but I viscerally experienced what I knew in theory, and that is that she enables me to do all the other things that I do. And without her, there is no this. A POS, your all cash test stupid. What? What? I don't know what that means. Clones. Okay. I heard a reporter ask Pierre Elliott Trudeau about property rights, and Trudeau said that will never happen. And it didn't. And it didn't. We don't even get fake ones. They couldn't even risk giving us fake property rights. So all we have is this, what do you call it, title system where we're entitled to the land. It's basically all leases. Identity politics always needs a shared banner. They've decided to steal the Canadian flag this time, which is something they used to shame for a recent initiative in opposition with the truckers. You're right, man. We shouldn't forget that. Displaying the Canadian flag was a cause for suspicion as recently as 2022. You could get stopped and asked questions for showing that thing. And when, in a travesty, when the protesters in Ottawa draped the Terry Fox monument in a Canadian flag, the shameless media in this country called it defacing. I can't even estimate how many media column inches were dedicated to the outrage at daring to put a Canadian flag and Canadian paraphernalia on Terry Fox. And then, of course, as often happens if you know how to pay attention, within a year, there was a great big pro-Palestinian march in Ottawa, and they draped the Terry Fox monument with Palestinian flags and paraphernalia, and the media didn't say a word. And now they have rehabilitated the flag. They have draped themselves in nationalism, a pseudo-nationalism, but they've draped themselves in nationalist rhetoric and verbiage. And the big red machine sycophants and hypnotized masses just went along with it. Yeah, elbows up. We'll show those Americans. What are we supposed to do? What's going to wake them up? The only thing that ever wakes people up when they're in that deep of slumber is hunger and misery and the death of their purchasing power. And if we wait long enough, we're all going to get it. Not just in Canada, but the Americans are going to get it too. Everybody's going to get it. We're all going to have to wake up at the same time. And the thing is, just as wrong as they are now, whatever they decide the solution is then is just as likely to be wrong. From one manipulation to another manipulation, from one fire to another fire, that's where the masses will jump. And maybe we can get in front of it. I remain hopeful. Who is really holding the sword of Damocles over these flip-flopping politicians? I don't know. I don't know for sure, Wendy. I can think of a lot of different reasons why. But to come up with the most compelling, on the one hand, it depends on what you're talking about. Like if you're talking about the war, I think it's very clear that more so in this term than in the first term, Trump aligned himself with the Israeli lobby's money. And he was very overt with it in the campaign. You could see this coming if you were wise when he was giving speeches to AIPAC and when he was talking. He was saying things that they wanted to hear, all while he was cashing Adelson's checks. But I don't think that alone is enough to explain it. I think that explains the trap that he's walked into. But I think the politics and optics of taking the loss that has to be taken now in order to get out of this thing is too much for him to bear. His legacy is on the line, personally. And as much as I don't want to admit it, well, no, it's not that I don't want to admit it. I thought Trump had more depth. I thought, you watch him through the first term and in the campaign leading into the Biden administration, that campaign, it's like there's this braggadocious public character who puts himself in the spotlight and says the most outrageous things to get the attention. And it's a tactical plan. And behind closed doors, he's a different person. I still continue to believe that is true, at least at the core of it, that's true. But this second term, it certainly seems to me that his ego is huge. I mean, he just gave himself 2 more awards today. 2 more trophies. I gotta hang on. I'll pull the picture up. In the midst of all of this, in the midst of waffling on yet another bombing campaign, we have this. I'm not going to give you the backstory because I don't want to waste much time talking about it, but not just 1, but 2. And all of these people standing around were telling him just how great he was, and he was loving it. I think the politics of optics, I think the impending loss in November, I mean, there's some people who remain very confident in the Republican Party's prospects coming into November. I don't think so. People will say that the Democrats are just crackpot insane. They're too crazy. They're just a bunch of communist socialists. I don't think that's wrong. I think a lot of their positions are insane. I just don't think it matters in a midterm. Just understanding the American mind and how they vote down there. The midterms aren't about picking a direction. The midterms are a judgment call on the direction taken by the person you elected 2 years ago to be president. And this president has not delivered on a lot of things that were really important to the independents who swung violently towards Trump. It's the independents that he's losing. We're not talking about the die-in-the-wool Republicans, even though there's a split there too. We're not talking about Democrats. We're talking about the people in the middle who make and break presidents. They see how much money it costs to fuel up their vehicles. They can sense the problem. They can see the rising costs, even as the president gaslights everybody and says everything's getting cheaper. It ain't. Keeps telling everybody that there's peace in the Middle East and there's a deal imminently. Even as the bombs fall, they can see it. And every bloody day that ticks by gets us closer to November. And do you think I want to see the end of, like, if the Democrats gain control of the House and the Senate, I still have hope. And there's a friend of mine in California, a viewer, a longtime viewer. Keith, if you're watching this, I don't know if you are. But he said to me, Frank, I think what you're missing, and I think the reason your subscribers are so angry at you because I've lost a bunch of subscribers, he says, is that you're not communicating what you want. You're only communicating what's been lost. And so this is a shout out to Keith. I very much want Trump to stop the insane war in Iran, take the L, come home before it's too late, and start focusing on that domestic agenda and maybe save his bacon in November. But I'll be honest with you, the audience, I'll be honest with Keith. I think it's too late for that. I think the best elements of the Republican Party have already been squandered and sundered and kicked out and defamed and demeaned. And the split is real and the independents have been driven away. And I just think it's going to be a rout. And I don't think Trump is able to fully deal with that. There are those who think there will be some kind of big crisis before then, and it will be some kind of justification for Trump to suspend elections and delay them. The scary part is when I see people putting their hopes on that idea, like they're hanging their hat on it, that this is what's going to happen. How is that positive for the Republic? That's basically the Julius Caesar moment. That's the moment the Republic is sundered and it becomes an imperium. And then I don't care if it's the guy you like. It's not good for republicanism. Not the Republican Party, but republicanism. That would be terrible. It's also never happened. America has conducted elections through crisis after crisis after crisis. It's the 250th anniversary of the Republic. Can you understand how bad an omen it would be for elections to get delayed in the 250th year? Like, think about what that would be as a legacy for Trump. I think a lot of the consequences are baked in already. There ain't much time left, man. It's August, September, October, November. We got less than 100 days. The war is showing no sign of ending, in spite of what he said yesterday. Yeah. Okay, we got to scroll down some more. I could spend the whole stream these days, if I wanted to, just reading comments. Salt Team 6 reporting from Bananada. Oh, the Silver Spoon twit and his cults of idiot and liars. I mean, this stuff is funny. I don't know what it does. I don't know what it accomplishes. That's why I never engage in it. Speaking of silver, we produce silver in this country. Somebody was asking the other day, what do we produce other than oil? And I'm like, silver, grains, commodities, copper, gold, got a lot of water, timber. Canada's got a lot going for it if we had leadership that actually wanted to make it a real strong representative country and was smart enough to just bury the hatchet with the Americans, stop acting like we can replace them with the Chinese and the Europeans, because we can't. You know what's really funny is now Carney's out there talking about our position as exporters of liquid natural gas. Was it only 3 years ago that Justin Trudeau told us there was no market for LNG in the world? That there was no point even chasing it? Again, if we become a net exporter of LNG, do you think Brookfield wins? Actions speak louder than words. Who you are speaks more loudly than what you say. The ability of government to just keep borrowing against the future for selfish means has led to this point. Yeah, I mean, they can just walk over to the mint and get more money. They don't even have to print it anymore. They can just digitize it and shove it right in the Bank of Canada, shove it right into the government's accounts, and they can just spend it how they want. Do you think the Ukrainian airliner that was blown out of the sky full of Iranian Canadian students over Tehran was really just a mistake? I don't know what I think of it. I'll tell you, I was more certain in the past than I am now of what I think of that particular thing. Yeah. Frank, what's your take on Fauci and COVID being back in the spotlight? I think it is slop. That's what I think it is. It's slop. This is a guy who has immunity. Doesn't have immunity from everything, but he has immunity. I think we're being given a theatrical performance that is supposed to serve as some kind of justice for what was conducted on everybody in 22. This is, it reminds me of Epstein all over again, where we were sold this idea that there was going to be Epstein justice, there was going to be arrest, there was going to be all this stuff. There are still idiots online today who are repeating the lines from Q, saying that arrests are imminent and the storm is coming. It's like, that storm, it's been coming for 8 years. It ain't going to get here. And it's actually made me think. When I was watching, I got to catch some clips of Rand Paul grilling Fauci, and I thought, is Paul part of this? Is he part of the theatrical performance? Nothing's coming out of this. Trump called himself the father of the vaccine. Somebody reminded me of that yesterday in the comment section somewhere. I don't know if it was on X or if it was in the YouTube comments. I was lamenting the entry into the war in Iran, and it was the Hungry Trucker on Twitter. It was on Twitter or X. And he said, I was done when he called himself the father of the vaccine and he was proud of warp speed. And I couldn't disagree. I was right there. And I think the way that I justify it, because I don't, but for instance, the Mo government here in Saskatchewan, they said they weren't going to lock anybody down. They weren't going to do vaccine passports. And then they changed their mind and they did it. I think politicians in general did not want to have thousands of deaths that they thought possible on their hands. I think there was a whole lot of people in positions of power who didn't know, just like the rest of us, how bad this thing was going to be or what it actually was and who was behind it. I think a lot of powerful people were taken by surprise, and fear compelled them to do things they wouldn't have otherwise done. And then the Mo government here in Saskatchewan, a year into the crisis, decided to listen to the other side. They had a lengthy meeting where members of the legislature got together and they listened to the likes of Malone and various other voices that were giving the other side of the argument. And within weeks, they lifted the mandates. They got rid of the vax passport. They didn't quite come out and apologize for it, but they certainly indicated that it was regrettable and that it wasn't likely to happen again. And they moved on. And I know that for a lot of people, including myself, moving on isn't good enough. But the realist in me says that that's as good as you're ever going to get at any career politician, is that they move on. Daniel Smith took it a step further and actually issued an apology. But this Fauci thing, no one's going to get arrested. There aren't going to be any lawsuits come out of it because everybody's got immunity anyway. It's theater. It's meant to look like a delivery. Do you remember when RFK Jr. was still running for president and there were negotiations going on behind the scenes for him to drop out and then join with Trump, which I think Kennedy's done a lot of good things in the U.S. government. You want to look for bright spots, look to RFK and what he's done at Health and Human Services and the FDA and the CDC and his influence on how those things are moving. I worry that if the election's lost in November and then you get a change of regime in 28, that it's all going to go away and everything's going to go back to the way it was. And that's a sad thing. But when those negotiations were underway, RFK indicated that one of his sticking points was that he wanted an acknowledgement, a public acknowledgement for Trump that the entire program was a mistake. And Trump wouldn't give it to him. He remained staunchly defensive of warp speed. And eventually, I'm sure RFK did the math, because to be in politics is to engage with a level of pragmatism. And he probably said, I can hold to this moral position. I can hold to this absolutely. But I may never get a chance to be operating at the highest levels of the U.S. government to advance my cause, which is figuring out why the standard American diet's still a thing, getting to the bottom of what harms are being done by what medical experiments and treatments, and doing as much good as I possibly can. And so he set it down and he set it aside. Does Trump actually understand that what he did was wrong? I don't know. I don't have any insight on that because it's not talked about. I think this, Fauci, I think it's theatrics. I don't think anything substantive is going to come out of it. D from RC, longtime viewer. Thank you, Frank, for all your efforts. Really appreciate it. I appreciate you too, man. Truly. Frank, love the show. With everything going so badly around the world, what would you recommend a guy to do to insulate oneself and family? Get out of the major cities if you're in one. Toronto, Vancouver, depends on the age of your family, I guess. If you got a young family like mine, get out. Get as far from it as you can. Get to a place that is culturally cohesive. Be in a place where it's still a high trust society. We have our problems where I live, but I rocked into a place to get ice cream for the kids while Amanda was gone. We went for a drive, and I get into the parking lot. It's a hot day. Every single car had their windows open, and everybody was inside getting their ice cream on. And I threw my car keys on my passenger seat, and I noted as I was walking, and I actually looked in people's windows, and I saw other people had their car keys sitting on their seats. You want to get to a high trust society where that's still possible. It's not to say that you can't. I mean, I don't know if that's smart all the time. The location, it was a very specific location where I think no one had to worry about anything. But you want to get to a high trust society that has a lower realized impact to the sins and excesses of mass immigration. You want to get where social stigma is still a thing for bad actors. Where I live, there's still a semblance of citizen justice that's just active. If you mind your own business, you're not going to get in trouble. But if you start messing with other people's property, it's not always the cops that are going to take care of that problem. It's very different from Ontario. You want to get where community bonds are stronger than government bonds. And I think that's a great place to start when it comes to insulating yourself and your family. Get out of the cities. Get out of the cities. That's where the rot's stemming from. I mean, it's not like Saskatchewan's without its flaws. Regina is the heart of the problem in this province. That's where the government is. That's where the DEI is. That's where all the radicals are. We have the problems too. But it's a long way from where I live. The only way out is with a citizen takeover of what they call governance. You need the fourth turning to progress to a point where new institutions can be built. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. People haven't had enough yet. People haven't suffered enough yet. So there's some good advice. Start filling your freezer. Food won't get any cheaper anytime soon. Yeah. Go buy that half cow and that quarter cow and put it away. You think you don't have the cash to do it? Borrow it. Interest is still not that bad. You can get a line of credit for 6 points. 6.45, I think, is where I'm at. It's my best credit. But you can fill that freezer, and it's not going to cost you a fortune, and you can just slowly work that off, and at least you've got it. Rice is cheap to put away. Look up dry canning on the internet. Get yourself some cheap jars from the local Sally Ann or Salvation Army. My goodness, if you live in Ontario or a place where there's millions of people, the cheap stuff you can have. That's one of the things about living in Saskatchewan that I do miss is the availability of used stuff is limited. But look up dry canning. You can make rice and oats and all kinds of cool things, shelf stable for 30, 40 years without boiling any water. You just got to heat it up and seal a jar. Pretty easy stuff. Same team, Fook ED. Yeah, no one likes erectile dysfunction, bro. Shelly, meanwhile, the rest of us suffer for it and have to pay for it big time. That could apply to everything. It's been so sad to see the nation I grew up in and love go and become what it is now. Even the world, for that matter, to see things from Ukraine and Russia to Iran and even Spain and other nations. Yeah, what's happening in the Spanish enclaves that are on the African continent is pretty bad. It's a warning as to what happens when you unleash that into wider Europe. Thank God we have the Atlantic Ocean, and the government can only do so much damage per year to us. But the Ukraine thing too, I'm watching the Ukrainians, and they have the ability to inflict damage on the Russians and their economy and their energy production at a time when the world needs that energy. We don't need, like, I mean, people should be more pissed off at Ukraine for what they are doing there, because they are interrupting fragile oil supplies that the world needs to try and fill in the gap that the Americans have gone and created by going into the Persian Gulf and screwing all that up. You know, and even Carney and the liberal government nibbling at the edges with all this carbon nonsense on our oil. It's like everybody just seems to hate energy right now. But the Ukrainians cannot change what's happening on the battlefield via their ability to damage the Russian economy. Like, we should be pissed at them for doing what they're doing to Russia, but we're not. We celebrate it in the media, and our politicians are like, they're turning the tide. They're not. You know, in the last 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost 72 square kilometers of territory. This week, they lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 300 square kilometers. Like, the pace of the Russian advance is accelerating. There are certain sections of the line where the Ukrainians are pushing back, but in no way are any Ukrainian advances on the front line diminishing how the Russians are rolling them over. They're moving in on Sloviansk, and I believe it's Kramatorsk. I sometimes get my Eastern Ukrainian names mixed up. Some of the hinges that are left in the Eastern Ukraine, like, the Russians are winning the war. They've been winning the war for a long time, and the only thing now that the Ukrainians can do is punish the Russian economy, but that in turn is punishing the world, which is already frayed because of all the damage all these wars are doing. And it's not changing the outcome on the battlefield. Ukraine is still losing the war every single day. Canadian politics feels like one great big never-ending humiliation ritual. It certainly feels like we're always just waiting to see what they're going to do to us next, because we don't have any power over them. And then whenever we do, like, one of the best vehicles I've always thought for the people to represent themselves is provincial, followed by municipal politics. Forget federal politics. But every time we cobble together a provincial government that might actually do something different, they just let us down and fail us. Every time. And Daniel Smith's in the process of doing that right now. So I get the sentiment. Mothers are great teachers. They are the best teacher. A loving mother who actually wants to put the time into her kids and who has the ability to do so is creating the best human beings to go forward through time when we are gone. Like, I can't say it enough, and I know I've said it before. Motherhood is the highest calling that there is. It's more powerful than fatherhood. And I'm not trying to diminish fathers. Don't say I'm just trying to be some kind of feminist. Fathers are integral to the development of empathy. We lay the law down in a way that the mother cannot. Like, I'll tell you the effect that my voice has on my kids. My wife is like a reed bending in the wind. And every now and again, I gotta come along and be a tree that doesn't bend, you know? It's not to say that the role that men play is diminished. It's just, versus sending your kids to a daycare, and I know some people have to do it. Like, I have to say these things anyway because they're true. Even if this describes your life to a degree, try not to take it personally, because I'm only saying it how I see it. I'm not judging anybody or everybody. I might judge some people, but I'm not judging everybody. But your children having the dedicated care of a loving mother versus sending them to daycare or sending them to a public school where they're going to be in a class of 30, where the most abusive, loudest, screaming kids are going to get the lion's share of attention. I mean, you know, we take the kids to the park on a regular basis, different parks all over the place. There's one park I go to in particular. Sometimes when we slide in, I don't know how the circumstances and the stars line up, But we get there at the same time sometimes as the daycare is getting there. And I've had this experience a couple times in this park where you're there, you're playing with the kids, you're pushing your kids on the swing, you're running around, you're playing, and the daycare kids are coming up to you and they're begging you, please push me on a swing. Please push me on a swing. They're begging for the attention. The daycare workers, they're all on their cell phones. They're living their own life. They're watching shorts, doing something else. They're having a smoke, doing their own thing. And these kids are just left to themselves, and all they want is the focused attention of an adult. And it breaks my heart. I'll be honest, it's brought tears to my eyes before. Kids just begging for adult attention. We got a room set up in the house. There's 2 desks, one for each child. My son has already gone through all the provinces of Canada. He's learned the capitals. He's learned the principal things that they produce in terms of commodities or what they make. And it's summer, and he's still doing schoolwork. It never stops. I mean, there's breaks. We do other things, but like now we're going through all the U.S. states, learning all the flags, learning what they produce, learning their mottos, learning what they're all about. And he said the other day, it was like 2 or 3 days ago, we were driving in the car doing something, I don't remember what. And he's like, I want to learn the whole world. Every country in Europe, every country in Asia, I want to learn them all because he knows the continents. Kid's 7 years old. And he's eager to engage, and he's got a dedicated tutor in the form of his mother. How is that not better? And I think the reason that it is so well represented in Saskatchewan, this is another thing that's beautiful about Saskatchewan. It's not just that you can homeschool here. It's that if you choose to homeschool, you get a portion of your education levy that comes out of your property taxes. You get some of that back. If you have 2 or 3 kids and you homeschool them all, you pretty much get the entire education levy back as a rebate. We also have a homeschooler bill of rights. We are protected. Now, the NDP could come along and take it all away. The NDP in this province is not this. This is not social credit under Tommy Douglas. Carla Beck looks like a nice girl. She looks like a nice farm girl. She sounds like a nice farm girl. But underneath the surface, the NDP that she commands is very much aligned with the federal NDP. And they've got that extremism represented well in the Regina legislature. And they could take it all away. And that's a very real, legitimate concern, especially when it comes up to election time. We're almost halfway through Mo's term this time. The Sask Party's been in power now, I think 19 years off the top of my head. You know, they made some promises during the last election they haven't kept. Yeah, it could all go away, and that's my point. But I think the reason it survives, and I think the reason it survives in places like Ontario and BC and Alberta, and the reason the unions haven't taken it away yet is that when you break it right down and you get right down to business, if you treat it seriously, you're not there. I'll admit it, there's homeschoolers out there who homeschool their kids. And it's not to actually engage with the education. It's to keep them out of the public school system for entirely ideological and political reasons. And they don't put the energy into it, and it shows. But that's the same with public school. Kids fall behind all the time. These flaws are evenly dispersed, whether you go to a private school or a public school or you homeschool. There's always going to be the low end of the spectrum and the high end of the spectrum. The only point I'm trying to make is that a concerted parent who treats it seriously and does with it the maximum that they can do, there's no substitute for it. Your kids have a personal tutor who is the person that they love the most in the world, at least until they meet their spouses. And even then, they'll probably still love their parents. If they're good parents, they'll probably love them the best forever. Like I watch it from a distance. I admit I try to. Sometimes I sit in on the classes, like these classes that they're going to go through when it comes to learning the states and learning the flags and learning about the states. I might actually be there for those because there's things I'm interested in learning. There's stuff my son has taught me from those classes that his mother is designing. But I keep a distance. I do my thing back here. I try to make sure the lights stay on. I try to do what I do. And I try to let her do what she does, and so she can manage that, and she can interface with the education people she's got to interface with, and she can keep her political husband on the sidelines somewhere. But like watching it, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I encourage anybody to try it. Like if I had to, I would mortgage myself into debt as far as I could to make sure that this continues. If at the end of it, my kids were educated and they went off and they did their own lives and I finished with nothing, I would feel like that was worth it. That was a worthy cost to pay. And that's what we're going to do. Luckily, my wife and I are on the same page. The flag should be flying upside down. Distress, call, indeed. Title equals legal use, deed, legal owner of property. Yeah. Do you have your deed? I don't have mine. I'm told it's registered at the municipal office, but I've never seen it. I fly the ensign for Canada. Screw that Liberal logo with the maple leaf. It doesn't grow past Manitoba westward. Good riddance. You know, no one voted for the flag. No one voted to replace the flag. I've been told that some of the words that I say and some of the opinions that I express is betraying my grandfather who served and my uncles and my great uncles who served. They went overseas and they fought the Nazis and they beat them back and all that Canadian pride. And my answer is always the country that they fought for has been replaced. The nation was replaced in 1982. The Bill of Rights was taken away and we were given this piece of junk charter in its place. The flag was replaced in the 60s. No one wanted it. No one asked for it. The thing that was bled over, my own copy from my grandfather, is stained. The country was replaced already. People say that when you talk about independence for Alberta or Quebec or Fortress North America, talking about the Constitution being better, that you're being some kind of traitor to the country. The country was already betrayed. We didn't even get a vote. I give Pierre Elliott credit for that because he was never popular, even though the popular myth is that he was this rock star politician and everybody loved him. His majorities were pretty thin and he led minorities. And when he replaced the country, he was not that strong. But I give him props because he actually managed to pull the wool over everybody's eyes and get it done. I just ordered a black and white Alberta flag to go upside down in my front yard. You do you, man. You know, if anybody questions your choice to do that, just remind them there's no worse treachery than what has been done to the country by its duly elected representatives. You flying a flag upside down is nothing compared to what's happened to this nation. Red ensign is the true flag. I agree. I mean, it kind of isn't. And the reason I say it isn't is because it's all been replaced. It might be the flag we honor, it might be the flag that some of us remember, but I think the vast majority of Canadians have no idea, and they don't, man. People who should know have no concept of how their country has been replaced. And when you explain it to them, right over their head. Daniel Smith is now a disciple of Net Zero. Smith is a turncoat. You know, Gene, she was always a disciple of Net Zero. That part hasn't changed because the only difference between her years ago and the Trudeau position was she wanted to do it by 2050 and they wanted to do it by 2030 or 2035, whatever the hell it was. She just wanted to kick the ball further down the road. She was still doing the carbon sequestration nonsense. She was still talking about carbon capture and all this. I don't know why she does it. There's no need for it. It's nonsense. Canada does not need to do any of this nonsense. No one else is. China's not doing it. The United States isn't doing it. The Russians aren't doing it. People are going to be begging for oil soon. A lot sooner than most people think, I believe. They're going to be begging for it. Are we still going to be talking about carbon capture BS up here at that point? Like Daniel Smith could really be doing something different. She could be conveying a different message. She could be pioneering a new form of political communication. For that matter, so could Polyev. So could Scott Moe, though I don't think anybody would listen to Moe, because when he did one of the bravest things I've ever seen done, which was setting everything else aside. Don't get me wrong. It sounds like I'm just trying to polish him up. Don't get me wrong, but when he arbitrarily removed the carbon tax from home heating fuel, that was an illegal, unlawful act. Call it an act of rebellion. And he did it. And he got away with it. And the only reason I think that it was successfully ignored is because Saskatchewan just flies under the radar. There's only 1.2 million of us. Great big province with nobody in it. And we do a lot of cool things here. We float the federal government in many ways. I mean, geez, the census. Everybody remember the census? People were right up in arms in Saskatchewan about that. Kicking census collectors off properties. And like right now, a lot of the municipalities are getting fire route numbers for the first time because most of the houses in the rural areas, in places, I shouldn't say most, but in many places, there's no street names. There's no addresses. It's a land location, some obscure arcane series of numbers that nobody knows how to use. That's how you find people. Everybody's done by P.O. Box. Now they're coming through with fire route numbers, and people are up in arms about that. Saskatchewan is a very different place, and it's a beautiful place. And I think if it had more attention, if it had a bigger spotlight, it might inspire people in other places to greater acts of civil disobedience. And I think the only reason we're successfully ignored is because we're so small. People don't even think about it. Like I thought about Saskatchewan a lot before I moved here. That's how I ended up here. But I didn't really understand how different it was and how awesome it was until I got here. I think it's an incredibly underrated place. I could do without the ticks. I could do without the mosquitoes this year. They've been horrible. I could do without some of these prairie storms. They can be a bit scary. But otherwise, it's pretty awesome. Thanks, Frank V. Trump seems to be overcompensating for the last term. I don't know what he's doing. I really don't. You know, Robert Barnes, I've said some things about him before if you don't know who he is. He represented Alex Jones during the Sandy Hook trials. He's a commentator now. He thinks he's got a form of dementia. I don't know. I don't feel like I've done enough research to even venture a guess. But it's like Trump's filters off, and there just doesn't seem to be a lot of forward strategic thought going into his actions. He seems to be caught in a trap, and he's trying to BS his way out of it. And it's not working on thinking people. It works on the sycophants. There's people who will snip, snap, back and forth constantly, will adjust their thinking to whatever the hell he's saying at any given moment without a second thought. I can't do that. I think the vast majority of people can't do that. But it doesn't stop him from trying to do it. Like, I mean, look at his Truth Social, man. Some of the stuff he posts on there, it's like, who are you and what are you doing? He posted an article today, I think it was, which was from the Wall Street Journal. Heck, let's just go have a look. We can do that. We have technology, people. We can just go look. You don't have to trust me. I can just show you. Winning shot in the Bedminster Club Championship. Thank you very much to all those who participate. Golf. The frickin' world is burning, man. It's called talent, and I have it. And they don't. President Donald J. Trump. Remember that picture I showed you of him giving himself trophies? President Trump unleashes oil production on the West Coast and Defense Production Act. He signed a piece of paper. Where's the one I'm looking for? This one. Trump's energy triumph 7 hours ago. Look, this is actually interesting. His engagement on his own social media is way down. Way down. It's wild. This is his thing. You click on this article. Trump energy triumphs. He prepared the U.S. and its allies for the current troubles in the Persian Gulf. But look at that date. That's March 12th. April, May, June, July. It's a 4.5-month-old article. Has anything changed in the last 4.5 months? What's he doing? What's it all about? And I'll tell you, the longer you scroll through, I know people will say, "Oh, he's so clever. He's memeing. It's the gravity of the moment is not matched by this. This was kind of funny in 2016, but now with the world on the very edge of collapse, I don't know, man. I don't really find it too funny anymore. I don't find it clever. I don't think it's helpful. I think his approval numbers are terrible. I think honest pollsters hang on. No, here's what we want. We want this. How many swings can the market make? A lot. And it makes a lot of people around Donald Trump a lot of money. People said in the first term, they were just they accused him of making all this money out of the presidency and doing all this insider trading. And I remember through 2016 and 2020, I constantly made the point that wasn't happening. The Trump family was losing money. Hand over fist, the Trump name was in decline. Big sacrifice, wasn't even collecting a wage. I said all of those things, and all of those things are true. I can't say the same this time. There's a lot of people, including Trump himself and his family, who are making a ton of money by being privy to information and decisions that he's going to make beforehand. It's not just Polymarket. It's placing positions in stocks that are going to benefit from whatever he says next. And his wealth is growing this time. It's not a good look. I don't remember what I was coming here to look for. What was I coming here to look for? This guy, Mr. Mitchell. We follow each other. We've, had some communication before. He should have way more followers, but that's what happens when you're honest and you just try and dig for the truth. You end up with less of a following than the people who just want to cater to a narrative and build their audience based on what the audience wants to hear. So this is from July 18th. I'm committed to representing only Americans. To ensure I can do that, I have taken this step. Now, if you guys don't know, Mark Mitchell was the brain trust behind Rasmussen. Rasmussen was at one time one of the most accurate polling houses in America. If you wanted to know the real presidential approval rating, or if you wanted to know how the Republican Party was polling in reality, you went to Rasmussen. And he did everything he could to keep it honest. Months ago, we're talking back in February. Now, I'm not sure on the exact dates, but back then, just before the war started, it was long before that, Mark Mitchell disappeared. His social media went quiet. He was gone. He was gone for a while, and the absence was noted. So I messaged him, and I'm like, buddy, blink twice if you're still alive. And he blinked twice and let me know that he was still alive. But it was very clear that he had been silenced by the people behind Rasmussen. That's me talking. That's not Mark talking. That's me talking. He had been silenced and prevented from doing honest polling. He was no longer allowed to poll the way that he wanted to. And so he chose silence over sacrificing his morals. And months later, he comes out with the Honest Polling Company. And I pray that he's successful. But his Twitter feed is just a font of good takes and information as he tries to just do honest things, as his loyalty is to ideas and not people. Yeah. Anyway, Mark Mitchell, the Honest Poll. You should give him a follow. Very talented man, very honest man. He has integrity, and I value integrity more than I value anything. Raymond Sycamore. Don't know how long ago, at 2:21 p.m. So I'm only 40 minutes behind, people. And the Fed, and income tax, and all welfare, and end all entitlements. Look at that picture. There are people, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know if you're still here, Raymond, but there are people who say to me, "Why do you watch that guy? Like, what's with that guy?" And it's like, well, for one thing, I only get to turn him, like, I can put you on when you're live. I rarely ever sit down. I usually have it on and I listen to it for a while. Yeah, I got a soft spot for Raymond. This is a guy who came into the streaming space expressing his frustrations with women and with the dating pool and with the state of relations between the sexes in 2025 and 2026. He grew a following and he attracted to himself some of the most horrible trolls and people who they literally he's I don't know if you wanted me to call you a recovering alcoholic. I don't know what to say, but he had a drinking problem at one time. He's talked about it in his streams. He quit drinking. He stayed sober. Bro's got a couple houses on the go. Like, he's got a lot going for him. He's a steady dude. And these people just want him to fail. They want to see him get drunk on stream. They want to see him fall down. They want to see him collapse and die like a falling star. And he takes it personally. And I remember, and this is, I said this to him a week ago or so. I wrote him a tweet. And I said, I forget what it was like coming into this game. Like, I've been doing this on and off for 10, 12 years. This is the first time I really want to do it steady and stay with it. I usually just come in when I have something really important to say, and then sometimes I can disappear for a year or two at a time. I don't want to disappear this time. And it's the reason I also do it the way that I do it. I'm not monetized. I don't have the YouTube ads. I don't have any of that stuff. I got a donate link. People try to throw shade at me for a donate link. That's what I got to say to you. I put a lot of time into it. I read a lot of books. I read a lot of articles. I do a lot of thinking to formulate these thoughts. Might not be on camera all the time, but I am on it every single day, and it's work. And the only thing I've got to make money off it is a donate link, and that's it. That's it. So you can just pound sand. But anyway, I forget what it was like to come into this new. I used to take everything so seriously, and my skin has grown so thick now that I'm able to turn it off and walk away from it. People say stupid things, and like sometimes I engage and I'll argue, and then other times I just put it all down. Sometimes it still gets to me, but it's always a passing thing because I'm an old hat. Got a lot of T-shirts. I've been through this. I've gone to debates, running in federal elections, and facing down my enemies, and like I've done all kinds of stuff that's made me pretty comfortable. Well, Raymond's new. He doesn't have that. And he has got a team of dedicated trolls who have unleashed AI chatbots on him, and all they want him to do is fail and stumble and fall. And they'd probably be happy to see him hanging from a noose in his garage. That's the tragedy of it. The blue whale people who just want to see other people suffer. And I say to him the same thing I say to anybody else. You got to figure out how to turn it off. You got to not give them your energy. They feed on your anger. They feed on your attention and your sadness. They feed on the fact that you take them seriously. And when you turn that off, they go away. But you can say what you want. He says some things sometimes that are a little bit, I'm a married man. I probably have a higher opinion of women in general than maybe he does sometimes because of the difference in our circumstances. I got a soft spot for him. Check him out if you want. Trump is an American president using all of his powers. Carney is an elitist globalist monarchist hell bent for profits for Brookfield. I think Carney is an elitist globalist. Okay, you want to call him a monarchist. Trump had he had King Charles at the White House for 3 nights and 4 days. How many times has Trump met with Charles? They seem to be on pretty friendly terms when they're sitting in the same room together. They do dinners together. They attend balls together. I see through actions, I see coordination between Carney and Trump. I hear them on hot mic moments where they're comparing notes and they seem rather cordial with each other. And then there's the public optics of dispute. Is it possible that they're all still working together in some way and it's not just Carney? I think so. All right, we got to skip down a little bit. See if we can, where are we? 229, 230. Let's pick one random. In the 70s, when going to school, you could leave your guns in the back window gun rack and the truck unlocked and no one would touch anything. And, and that's a high trust society. That's something the Iranians have that we don't have anymore. I watched a news report. I'm not going to find it. Maybe I'll try and find it for a future cast. But I watched this news report, and it was this white journalist. I think she was British. I don't know who she was working for, but she lives in Iran, and she was queuing for gas. And at the time, in the Western media, they were saying that Iran was experiencing all of these fuel shortages. And she said, I'm going to show you what that looks like. So she was waiting in line for sure. She had to wait in line. But it was less than, I think the video was 7 minutes long, and about 2 to 3 minutes was her getting into the gas station. And as she was getting into the gas station, she was explaining the rationing system because the Western media was saying Iran is rationing gas. The rationing system was, and I might get the amounts wrong, but it's instructive anyway, that you had access to 200 liters a week. The first 200 liters was 1 American cent, that part I remember, per liter for your first 200 liters. The second tier was 2 cents, 2 American cents for the next however many hundreds of liters. And then the third tier was unlimited, but it was 3 cents a liter. But the thing that really got me, because the whole report was about fuel supply and prices in Iran. And when she pulled up to the pump, the attendant started filling up her pump. She takes her bank card and she gives it to him and she hollers her PIN number to him. And then he takes it. He makes the transaction for her. And you can hear in the background everybody at the gas station yelling PIN numbers to the attendants. Now, people might say, well, that's crazy. I would never do that because you live in a low trust society. The Iranians have a high trust society. And I got to tell you, my heart called out in envy for that. Because what this fella's saying here in the 70s, when going to school, you could leave your guns in the back window. My dad told me the same thing about the 1960s. You could take your gun to school, and on your way home from school, you'd be shooting gophers the whole way to stop them from messing with the crops in the fields. That was the trust. The kids took their firearms to school. Some days, not all the time. That still exists here. You still see people walking with their rifles down the side road. Totally illegal, technically. Well, a loaded firearm walking on a public roadway is technically illegal, but people do it here all the time. Saskatchewan land's different. And I don't think talking about it's going to change it. I don't. It's just different. It's the same RCMP, but things are very different. A high trust society is better than a well-governed one. Because a high trust society governs itself. Do you think a Black Swan event is coming by September 11th? I don't know. By September 11th, I don't know. I tend to believe that the attack on the LNG tanker in Egypt was a false flag, but I don't know that either. I don't think it makes any sense for Iran or its proxies to try and get smoke with Egypt. I think it makes more sense for Israel or the Americans, probably Israel though, to try and manufacture that smoke to drive a wedge between Egypt and Iran, to try and drive a wedge between Iran and anybody else in the region. I think they fear more than anything Iran starting to cut deals with some of those Gulf nations, because I'll tell you what might happen. If the Americans go ahead and bomb the Iranian energy infrastructure and the Iranians end up bombing the Gulf energy infrastructure, when all the bombing is over with and they've destroyed everything, and the Americans leave with their tail between their legs, just like they did in Afghanistan, which they're going to end up doing again. I've been saying this over and over again, that Trump's efforts in Iran actually somehow managed to make Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan look good. In terms of geopolitical damage and strategic damage, this is way worse. Way worse. But in the wake of all that, in the wake of all the destruction, we get through our fourth turning and we start building new institutions and a new reserve currency and a new reserve system and an international settlement layer, and we start putting the world back together. The Iranians and whatever Gulf countries, whatever configuration they are, because they won't look like they do today, the fake countries will be gone and there will be something new. And I don't pretend to foresee what it will be in particular, but a new arrangement will emerge from all of that chaos. And all of a sudden, the Iranians will not be stigmatized in the region anymore. And all the bombs in the world can't change that impending reconfiguration of relations. I'm Ukrainian and don't support their government one bit. Good. I think that's a perfectly valid position to take. If you are a nationalist, if you're a lover of Ukraine, if you value the people of Ukraine, then you need to be against the Zelensky government, because it's the Zelensky government and their needless war with Russia. And I know, oh, Russia invaded. Well, what was Zelensky doing? What caused the invasion? Can we just be honest about all the different things that happened that led to the war? And it's the Zelensky government right now that's keeping this war going. And that, my friend, as you probably know, is what is killing millions of Ukrainians. That's what's causing the suffering of the Ukrainian people. The Zelensky government. Hating them is a perfectly rational position for somebody who loves Ukraine. Russia just started considering it a war. Game over. Yeah, I mean, Putin can't afford to lose this thing. He can't afford to lose face. I think the Ukrainians are doing significant political and economic damage at this point. But it's Pyrrhic. They can't win on the battlefield. They can cause the damage, but I don't think it's going to weaken the Russian people's resolve. I don't think, I mean, we keep getting reports, the shadow of John McCain looming large over events, that rumors that the Russian government is on the ropes and, you know, just a little bit more pushing and it'll fall. None of that is true. Prairie Fire Songs on YouTube is a good channel for Western songs. Okay. All right. Let's just punch that in. We'll keep that open in a tab and I'll check that out later, man. Thank you. Russians are going to take Odessa. Yeah, they might go for that. Whether they go for that before fall or they wait for the harvest to come off and then they go for it in the winter during some kind of a winter offensive, I think they've definitely been conducting a shaping operation, which would lead you to believe it's not going to be an easy one, though. Odessa is not going to be easy. But if the war is to continue, and I think it will, because Zelensky doesn't want it to end, there's no elections coming. He still is supported by the Europeans. It's such a tragedy, man. It breaks my heart. These are sons sent off to die, just like my boy. Sons and fathers, because they're conscripting people up to the age of 45 or 46 now. It's just, it breaks my heart. But if it continues, they need to cut Ukraine off from the sea. So yeah, Odessa is definitely a logical goal. They're just going to continue to bring East India into our country. We need strong mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters. Well, that is a problem. We are importing a lot of future ethnic conflict, and they bring their practices. So, I mean, there was a video that went viral from Belleville, Ontario, very near to where I used to live, my stomping grounds for most of my life. And it's just another import dumping garbage in some farmer's field. They, you know, when you bring people in who have completely destroyed their own countries with pollution, I don't know what you expect. If you do it, you know, you can bring people in. You can bring people from other ethnicities in, but you have to give time for integration, and you have to prioritize integration. You have to prioritize that the people who you bring into your country have to adopt your cultural practices. They have to adapt to the host country. They have to leave their baggage behind. They have to leave the country they came from behind, and they have to become what they come to. We're not doing that here. We're just dumping people in, and we're saying, up until recently, until Carney came along, we said we were a post-national state that had no core identity. That was the core message of the Justin Trudeau government, is that there was nothing really core about Canada We were just an amalgamation of everything else. Really shitty message. You can't make a country on that message. And then Carney came along, and now we've rehabilitated the flag, and we're using nationalist rhetoric, which sometimes borders on the jingoistic. I mean, when you talk about Ford threatening to cut off electricity with a smile on his face to 1.5 million Americans, that's jingoistic. So they're doing the nationalist thing, but in policy, we're still feeding into what Prime Minister Modi, who's the leader of India, called the foreign policy of emigration versus immigration. He recognizes that exporting Indians into the United States, because it's the United States is issuing 600,000, I think it is 600,000 H-1B visas. So all of those Americans are being displaced from the job market. You wonder who's policing you on X? Like, X is a captured platform. I'm still there. Unfortunately, my membership renewed before I canceled it, so I'm stuck for another year with my blue check mark. After that, they're not getting any more of my money because it's a captured platform. If you go against U.S. foreign policy or you say anything critical about Israel, it's just like someone comes along and turns the dial down, and the person that's turning the dial down these days, they're Indian engineers who have displaced Americans. Like, America has the same problem we have. It's configured differently there. And the Indian government has a stated position that emigration, that is Indians going into Europe and Indians going into Canada and Indians going into the United States, is a tool for their foreign policy objectives. They know it and they use it as leverage over the states they target. It's just another layer of foreign interference. We talk about China, but we don't talk about how India is using their population to gain control or gain influence in other nations. That's what you see happening in Canada. It's not going to be everybody. It's not going to be all of them. I don't want to paint with too wide a brush. But, I mean, you can see the truth with your own eyes. Who is Mark Carney working for? The international financial class, the central bankers, JP Morgan Chase, Brookfield, the same interests he's worked for his entire life. He is not working for Canadians. He doesn't believe the elbows up rhetoric. He makes money and he succeeds when Canada and the United States are further integrated. And one way to guarantee that they are further integrated is by weakening our sovereign position, which is what, in some ways, I think he is doing vis-a-vis the United States. I think the gestures and I think all the rhetoric around embracing China is it's like another smokescreen, because China can never replace what the Americans do for us. Nobody can, because the Americans are right there. They're proximal, right beside us. They buy things that no one else in the world will buy from us. They send us things that no one else in the world can afford to send us. So I think like I said, I think there is an optical big red machine propaganda layer, and then I think there is the intent, and I think the intent is far more integrated with the United States than the optical layer would have you believe. And honestly, it's how they have to do it, because the elbows up people, being kind, and those who have been hypnotized by the big red machine for the last several decades, a lot of them boomers, would not go along with this thing if it was sold to them honestly. If they were told honestly what the plan was, they would never go along with it. So you package it in elbows up rhetoric. You give them the jingoistic words. You make Doug Ford seem like a redeemable character from the perspective of somebody who's been hypnotized by the big red machine. All of us out here look at him and we just see a liberal. They see a hated conservative that has some soft edges. That's how they see it. So you package it that way, and then you cut their beloved public service. Eventually, you get around to cutting their entitlements. You set up a situation where the integrationist push is more concretized, like where the two nations, for the purposes of Brookfield and JP Morgan and these financial interests, are more easily integrated. You set that up all the while while just saying other things, and people will believe the superficial, and they won't even bother to peel past the superficial to what's actually going on, which is integration being beneficial to both Mark Carney personally and to the class that he represents. NDP is not family friendly. No, it is not Tommy Douglas's social credit. That's for sure. Saskatchewan, it's often credited for giving birth to the NDP, but I'll tell you, the socialism that came out of Saskatchewan has, the more I read about it, I haven't talked about it much, but the more I study the history of Tommy Douglas and the movements in this province, the more I understand that the character of things here was very unique. And it's the closest thing to a socialism of the individual, which sounds like Orwellian doublespeak. This is why I don't talk about it. It had an admirable quality. And until I'm ready to talk about it in more detail, until I get my language around it sorted out, I don't even want to talk about it. But the thing that this province gave birth to in this country is not what it became. Like I say, no child is born evil. They become evil with time. So it is with what was born in Saskatchewan and what it grew up into. It certainly wasn't evil when they put together the grain pool. It certainly wasn't evil when the province came together and organized the co-ops and did many of the things that they did, because people separated by such distance and such low population density had to build the branch lines and had to build the railroad and had to figure out how to get product to market. And there was a lot of screw-ups along the way. A lot of them came from Ottawa. You go right back to before Saskatchewan was even a province, and the decision was made to build the first transnational rail line through the south instead of coming up through the Yellowhead, screwing over everybody that lived here and everybody that wanted common sense. Instead, a bunch of people from the east built the railroad through the south, and then a bunch of settlers came and tried to farm Palliser's Triangle, and they all failed because it's practically a glorified grass-covered desert down there. Maybe not this year. Anyway, what came out of this province was built in spite of Ottawa, built against Ottawa, and it is a form of socialism. Has such bad connotations, but it was a form of individualistic socialism that grew out from here to become the toxic shit pile that it is now. Commander Spork, NDP Comrade Convention. I'm going to let my laugh speak for me. I wonder how the war ties into the 2030 agenda. I don't know if it does. I think it ties into the agenda of a particular nation that has its own third temple death cult, which needs to do a bunch of things in order for, their Messiah to come down. And, it should be said, too, that we're not talking about, because a lot of people want to talk about generalities. So, like, whenever I talk about Ontario, for instance, I talk about how bad the culture's got. I talk about how the trust society is collapsing, how Toronto is everywhere. I can talk about the bad things, but I always want to put it with the caveat that there are millions of people in that province who still share my values, who I still look very kindly on, who I still think about, and whose welfare I still think about. The same is true of Jews. You'll never hear me use the term Jews. You'll never hear me say Jewish conspiracy. I can't do that. If it was true, I could, but I can't, because it is not a Jewish conspiracy. I talk about the Israeli government. I talk about Zionists. I talk about third temple nut jobs, because those are things I can sink my teeth into. But there are millions of Jews in Israel. There are millions of Jews in the rest of the world who don't agree with any of this that's happening, who aren't third temple nut jobs. It's the same with Christians. I don't want to paint evangelical Zionist Christianity as representative of the body of Christianity, because it's not. So I'm always very careful. So I never use the word Jewish because it's not accurate. I talk about Third Temple extremists because I can put meat on those bones. I can show you the individuals who are literally trying to trigger the end of the world. So whenever anybody talks about the Iranian death cult, well, it's a death cult on the other side too, as far as I'm concerned, when everybody's trying to trigger the end of the world. I believe Iran has churches as well. They do. The main rail station in Tehran, I believe it is, has murals dedicated to the Virgin Mary and to Jesus Christ, and it's beautiful, and they're clean. There's no drug addicts everywhere. There's no graffiti. Everything is polished and beautiful and modern. You can watch 100 different travel blogs on Iran, because before the war began, lots of people traveled there and they filmed it and they put it on YouTube, and you can watch it. You can find out that most of the things that you think about Iran are completely false. If it's being painted by Fox News and those who say it's just one gigantic death cult, that is not the entire story, not by a long shot. The Armenian Christians are a valued minority in Iran for the sacrifice that they made. People talk about the Iranians, and they've been at war for 47 years with the United States, and they've killed all these Americans. Far more Iranians have been killed by American foreign policy than the Iranians have ever even, let alone killed, but harmed Americans. The entire Iran-Iraq war. It's not to say that minorities don't suffer persecution, and there isn't persecution in Iran, because there is. But there's also a Jewish diaspora that lives in Iran. One of the synagogues was bombed by the Americans. Did you hear about that? Hang on. I'll show you. I will show you right now. I'll take the time. I will show you the synagogue that was bombed that no one else is going to show you, because people are so pathetic. If I can find it. There we are. Now, I don't want to paint too positive a picture, but what I am going to tell you is that it's the Iranian state that comes in and cleans that mosque up. It's the Iranian state, or not mosque, I'm sorry, synagogue. It's the Iranian state that's going to come in and help them rebuild. And I don't want to say it's a thriving population, and I don't want to say that every Iranian Shiite loves the Jews that live in Iran, but, there's another example. Am I going to condemn that Jew when I paint a picture? If I paint a picture of a Jewish conspiracy, I can't. That guy's getting bombed by the Americans. He's getting bombed by Israel. They exist there. So it's not, we speak in generalizations about Iran, and we shouldn't. You need if you want to be honest, if you want to be truthful, you have to speak from a much more nuanced position. And sure, there's an underground church in Iran, and sure, it's not all bells and whistles and roses, but there's something like 1 million to 2 million Christians in Iran, and some of them are underground. There's hundreds of functional churches. There's hundreds more that are underground because there is some state repression, but there is state repression in Israel. What are the settlers doing in the West Bank? Burning down entire Christian villages while Trump says nothing and U.S. media says nothing. The Israelis bomb the last Christian churches in the Gaza Strip, and nobody says anything. They just shrug their shoulders. There's actual codified religious persecution against Christians in Israel. And the American answer is to send them billions of dollars and spend hundreds of billions more executing their wars. That's the truth. Who's doing the dying in Lebanon? It's not just Shiites, Christians. The Syrian government, ISIS, who Trump invites to the White House. They put him in a suit. They put a Philip Patek watch on his wrist, invite him to the White House, glad hand, shake hands. And what's he doing? Killing Christians in Syria. The lot of the Christian in Syria is a hell of a lot worse now than it was under Assad. And all the evangelical Christians in the United States who support this Zionist war, they got nothing to say. And it's pathetic. Homeschooling is a huge threat to the establishment who can keep important subjects out of the public curriculum. There's that. It also does a really good job. I mean, if you take it seriously, it does a good job. It does a good job. Francisco, you should have these live programs more often. You're right, Mars. You're right. I should. I really should. DEI, division, entitlement, and inequality. That's certainly what it is now. I'm from Newfoundland. Just caught your live. Peace and love. Bias. Right on. Same to you. I'm sorry, where is it? The Wild Rose Witch. Criticism of Clyde and Marty. You know, I don't watch what they do. But I'll tell you about Clyde. He's one of the only people who ever offered to have me on his show, never told me what to say, never told me what to think, never told me what to do. And he does what he does. I do what I do. And I remain grateful for him for that, because most influencers won't touch me with a 10-foot pole. And I'm willing to bet that if I called him up today and said, hey, man, let's do a stream together, he would still have me on. And we might debate American foreign policy, or we might have an argument or a disagreement or whatever, but I think he would still do that. He does what he does. I do what I do. And I'm not going to get into some kind of flame war with somebody who's done me no wrong. I can barely even read that. I appreciate you being real. I do what I can, Nicholas. I do what I can. Regarding Alzheimer's, I'm somewhat worried about my memory and focus. Seek medical advice. Maybe some fasting. Hope you get. I hope you're all right. Not sure where that's coming from. I hope you're all right. Autism in 1961, percentage of autism was estimated at roughly 1 in 2,421 children. In 2026, it's 1 in 50 children diagnosed with autism, and there's a distinct lack of curiosity as to why that is. And in fact, there's a great big push to just normalize it and essentially just tell everybody that it's perfectly normal and okay. And if you question why, or you think it's a disorder, you're stigmatizing, and there's a lot of parents who back that. I'll tell you, if I had an autistic kid, and I don't, I think I've got one that's like her daddy. She's very fast thinking. She might have the ADHD, which is fine. It's just a different way of thinking. It's a different way of, I think it's a labeled brain function thing. I think we all have different minds. You know how some people have an internal narrative and some people don't? I do. My mind is always doing something from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. It's always going. There's always something happening up here. Sometimes it's just music playing, but there's even generally actually lately there's been no music. Never even realized that. I haven't had a song playing for a week and a half. Probably shouldn't listen to any music because that rarely ever happens. There's usually something stuck in my head. But my wife doesn't have an internal narrative. Not like I do. She has her mind works a different way than mine. She's not a stupid person. She's an educated person. She's brilliant. But we've talked about, our inner workings and we work completely differently. At any rate, I would think that people should be curious about autism. And I know a lot of people want to point their finger in one direction or another direction. I have never been able to sufficiently point my finger in anything. But I do know the food supply has changed. I do know that there's a lot more medical products going into our kids than was happening 50, 60 years ago. I know that we have altered the food supply greatly. And we don't know what it does. Like, we don't know what it does when you're not feeding your kids whole foods that they have for thousands of years ate until modern times. Now they're eating a completely different diet. We don't have research as to what that does. We don't have long-term data. We're not even looking for it. So we don't know what that does. We don't know what the constant stimulation of the immune system does to the body because nobody's really looking. There's a lot of vested interests that don't want us to look because there's so much money being made from things the way they are. The other one that interests me is these things. My kids don't have these. My kids don't have tablets. I do sit them in front of the computer. They use a keyboard and a mouse. It's limited and it's controlled and it's educational, but I don't give them free reign with tablets and devices. I think back to Steve Jobs. Steve didn't let his kids have the devices that he was designing and selling the world. A lot of parents just hand their kids tablets and let them go to town for hours and hours at a time. I've seen kids that their backs are shaped like this. They're like 12, 13 years old, and they're already like this because they sit on the couch hunched over and nobody's at them to stand up straight. Nobody's kicking them in the ass and saying, stand up. I don't want to shield my kids from technology. They have to learn how to use it. But before they engage wholeheartedly with technology, they need to use their minds and their imagination. And so my children are capable of pretend play. They're capable of drawing things out of their imagination. They're capable of deduction. They're capable of old school research. My son is starting to be capable of doing his own self-directed research on a computer. But they read print books. They engage with physical toys and physical play. They build things tactilely. They learn in an older way. And it's not to say that technology isn't important and it won't come into their lives, because it will. But before that happens, they will have a base in being human. And we don't have a good baseline of research to understand how these are changing our kids and changing how they become adults. I mean, I just discovered a couple weeks back, I discovered the term iPod kids or iPad kids. And it's like, if you go on YouTube and you type in iPad kid, you'll see there's a whole bunch of satire about iPad kids. I found it scary. Like, I stopped watching. I didn't find it funny at all because it was satirizing something real and observable that I myself have seen, not so much here in Saskatchewan, because I'll tell you, one of the first experiences I had when I moved here was I had a local family over for dinner. They're still friends. I don't talk to them very much, but I still think of them as friends, and I talk to them when I talk to them, and I should probably give them a call and have dinner here soon. But we had them over to the house, and they brought their kids with them. And at the time, they were like, and I might get the exact years wrong, but they were 2 years apart. It was like 18, 16, and 14. And, you're wondering, you just don't know what to expect. They come in, they're well-dressed. They haven't self-harmed. They don't have 50 piercings. Their hair is the color it was when they were born. And we talked about work. We talked about tractors. We talked about weather. We talked a little bit about politics. We talked about hunting. They had no hangups. They weren't imbalanced. They weren't gender confused. They were so straight laced and perfect. We went into my garage. We talked about my tractor. I'll tell you, every time I see them to this day, I give them a firm handshake just like I would any other man. Maybe not the daughter. She doesn't get a firm handshake yet, but and it's just because she's the youngest, but maybe that'll change. I don't know. But I was so impressed. And like all the kids I've met so far have an element of that. They're just kind of based in reality. Like I often say that Saskatchewan is like turning back the clock to 1990, except you have good modern internet and people use Google Pins to navigate everywhere. Like it's modern, but it's old school at the same time. I remember when I first rolled into one of the towns, when I first got here, I walked into a farm supply place just to see what they had. They didn't even have debit terminals. They were still a cash-based paper business. They had just bought a computer and they were just computerizing their invoicing system. And I was like, this is awesome. This is just great. I didn't think this was possible. So it's, I'm not trying to judge anybody when I say these things. To me, this thing, we don't know the consequences. And because of the unknowns, I approach it very cautiously. Especially these, like even me, I keep my phone as stupid as possible. Half the time it's forgotten somewhere in the house. People are trying to get a hold of me. I just thought of somebody actually. I'm just going to, as I sit here. Yeah, there he is. I don't know if he's watching this, but I'm going to send him a message right now. I'm going to be like, hey man, I'm just doing a live stream and I just thought to check Telegram for the first time in a couple months. And I'm going to read your messages when I'm done here. So I'll talk to you soon, brother. So anyway, like my phone's pretty stupid. I do everything on a computer. I've got my keyboard and I've got my trackball mouse. And then I've got one on the other side where my chair is. And I've got a big TV here where I do most of my research work. And there's a keyboard and mouse over there, and it's all connected to the same computer, and that's how I do things. And when I walk out of this office, I walk out of this office. I read books on my Kindle and my Scribe because I find that's very easy for political stuff. But like, I still have a lot of paper books. I still use a library to check books out. The kids use their library to check books out. Like, I think it's really important to be tactile and to use your mind, to have imaginative play, and for the kids to grow up knowing how to do those things before they engage with technology, because AI is great. But if all you're doing is asking AI what reality is, you're not using it right. But if you are directing it, if you're in charge of the interface and how you use it, just like Google, just like the internet, if you are a functional adult and you're approaching it from that perspective, then it is a hell of a tool. But if you don't have that perspective, I don't know. I'm not even sure you're a human at that point. I used to support Trump until he gets involved in our elections and cost PP the election. No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think he cost Pierre Poilievre the election. I think that's an overstatement. I think Poilievre missed an opportunity to strike a diplomatic pose with the United States. He bandwagoned elbows up. He didn't use the elbows up phraseology, but he piggybacked off the message. Talked about being strong and opposing the Americans and resisting their inroads. And I think he made a big mistake. What he should have said is, the Liberal government has spent 10 years ruining the relationship between us and our best partner, not friend, partner in the United States. And what I want to do when I get into office is I want to fix that. I want to put Canada first, but I want to fix that relationship. They've insulted this administration. They did it in the first one. It's caused irreparable damage. And I think that maybe I can take it from irreparable to reparable and take this diplomatic stance. He didn't do that. And I also believe that Trump wanted Carney. And I think Trump was very open and honest about that. And I think it's obvious why he wanted Carney. Carney's a JP Morgan Brookfield guy. People, including myself at first, a long time ago, thought, he spent most of his life in Europe and now he's going to come back to Canada. Well, what was he doing in Europe? He wasn't representing European interests. Even when he was at the Bank of England, if you look at what he did at the Bank of England, did that strengthen the European position? Did it strengthen the British position? Certainly didn't, but it did strengthen the American position. And when he was over in Europe, who was he working for? JP Morgan. He was working for the financial class. I don't know if it was actually JP Morgan. It was another firm whose name I forget. It really doesn't matter. It's the same class. It's the same banking interests. He was over there representing American interests. And so I think it's, and then when you look at Brookfield and Kushner and the funding of the Trump family and all this stuff, it just makes perfect sense that he would actually want Carney. But you see, I think Poilievre could have played his hand differently, and that would have forced Trump to have taken a more neutral ground, and Poilievre might have come out stronger. And sure, the big red machine would have attacked him, but why are conservatives so afraid of fighting with the media and fighting with the big red machine? It's the one thing that they're supposed to do. You know, if you're not getting bad copy every single day in the liberal press, you're not doing your job. You don't cater to them. You make them write bad things about you, and then you fight with them every single day. He didn't do that. And some would say that he made a mistake by not going on the American podcast. I don't think so. I disagree with that. I don't think going down to the United States and going on American media would have helped him at all up here. You know, I can nod my head and acknowledge that even if fake Canadian nationalism was very strong during the election, and you're competing to be elected the prime minister of this country. You don't campaign down there. If campaigning down there did anything, Bernier going down there and throwing Canada under the bus while he was at it would have done good things for him electorally in the PPC. It didn't. They lost. I believe they came out of the election with 20% of the support they had in 21. It was a complete and total catastrophic loss for the PPC and everything they stand for. So going on the American podcast didn't help Max at all win elections in Canada. So I don't actually think Pierre was wrong on that. And he did go on a number of Canadian podcasts. Now, you can say that he went on select ones that were weak and friendly. And then eventually, you know, he did go do Joe Rogan, which I don't think did good things for him either. But it was more because he just seemed so nervous, to my eyes anyway, when I watched it. I didn't watch it. I couldn't watch it all. If it was captivating, I would have watched every second of it, but I didn't find it compelling. And I think I made it about 40 minutes in before I'm like, you know, this just isn't my time. But during the election, I don't think not going to the States and doing podcasts was a mistake. I think Canadian podcasts, and people say, well, why isn't he going on Canadian podcasts? He did it. He did the podcast circuit. He didn't do it all, you know. He didn't come on mine, but why would he? I'm small potatoes. And I know he didn't go and talk to the Second Sons and Jeremy McKenzie, but why would he? Doesn't make any sense. But he did go on a number. He was interviewed by Jasmine Lane and a bunch of other ones. And you can criticize, you can say that they're safe zone and they play the game and whatever else. And sure they do. They occupy a place. That's what they do. And it makes sense that he would go and talk to them. There's this whole political game in Canada, which I don't necessarily have to respect. I certainly won't cater to it. It's not for me. But other people play that game, and because they play that game, they get access. And because they get access, they get opportunities to interview Pierre. That's the track they take, and good on them for it. I think Pierre lost because he went from speaking from the heart, he went from apple-eating Pierre to talking point Pierre. He made the same mistake that all conservative politicians make in this country, and that is going from being adversarial to thinking, hey, I've got a commanding lead and I can just coast across the finish line. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to upset anybody. I've got this thing in the bag. All I got to do is repeat my talking points. You know what was pathetic? Drove me nuts? was during the debate. Every time Poilievre opened his mouth, Carney's attack dog Singh would talk over him. And, would it have been so hard for Pierre to turn around to Singh and just tell him, shut up, man, I'm talking. Do you have any class whatsoever? You should have put him in his place. And he missed an opportunity to do that. Instead, he looked at the camera, he made eye contact with the camera, he gave us the fake politician smile, and he repeated the lines. And it lost him the election. He was successfully, the Liberal Party and the big red machine was always going to paint him as being in Trump's back pocket. It was never true. It was never true. But he tried to defend himself against that accusation far too much. And he did it with talking points. So there was no passion. It didn't come across as genuine. And what he should have done, like I said, he should have struck a diplomatic pose saying that the relationship needed to be repaired. And then they would have said, but you're going to sell us out. See, he's going to sell us out to the United States. And he should have argued that point that it wasn't a sellout. It was an acknowledgement of reality. That we are dependent on these people, that trade with these people is prosperity for all Canadians. He could have made the case. He's a smart man. He could have done all of it. And he chose not to. And he lost. And he's losing still because he hasn't changed his strategy. And I don't think there's a future for the Conservative Party in Canada for a long time if his leadership fails. Like if they kick him out or he fails, some people say Jamil, some people say some other people. No. After Pierre, it's just if he can't do it, it's Carney unending until it's revealed in some overt and obvious way that Carney's actual plan was integration with the United States the entire time. In such an overt way that people, his base, actually see it and they're forced to see it. But by then, it'll be too late. Donald is not Elvis. He does like burgers and can dance well, but no way not. He does have I wouldn't say he can dance well, but he does have kind of a geeky groove, which is kind of charming. One of the ones that really got me smiling actually was just after the election. There's a series of balls. Actually, I think it was the inauguration. So after the inauguration, there's a series of balls that presidents attend by tradition, and I think it was the Navy ball. I think it was an armed forces function, and he's up there on stage with Melania, and they play his song, the YMCA, God help us. They play that song, and he's doing his dance and whatever, and he's supposed to cut the cake, and the commandant comes along. I believe it was a commandant, and hands him a sword to cut the cake with. And he cuts the cake, and then he's dancing away, and he starts swinging it around, and he just starts being a monkey with this sword. And it was really quite charming, I thought. Really quite charming. This was before the Epstein cover-up, before, do we want to get into the Charlie Kirk assassination and what I think is going on there? I mean, I don't think Tyler Robinson is where that story ends. I don't know how anybody who's paying attention to that trial and paying attention to the evidentiary holes that are in that trial could ever come to the conclusion that Tyler Robinson acted alone. I think it's fishy as hell. This was before Butler happened. This is before the war happened. This is before, remember when Trump post-election, after inauguration, after he was president, we're talking last spring, summer, he was going around to restaurants doing public relations tours, and one of his talking points was, are you all enjoying that cheap gas? It's never been cheaper. You got the cheapest gas ever. Are you enjoying your meal? It's made cheaper by all the cheap gas. Prices are coming down. That's all gone now. And I fear it's like we're a week or two or maybe days away from it well and truly being gone and disappearing from the radar altogether, because he still talks about it as prices are going to rocket to the ground. They're going to shoot into the ground like a meteor as soon as the war in Iran is done. That's his talking point, or has been. He's been getting quieter on it, which I think is a worrying sign. And the preparations for this major bombing campaign, I still think he's going to do it. I think the logistical deployments speak louder than political words. I don't think he wants to, because it's going to cause a lot of death and destruction. It might tank the global economy. And I think the reason he waffled this weekend is simply because he knows somewhere deep inside, in spite of all of his rhetoric, the American military is thin, really thin. It can't conduct a major war anywhere in the world right now. And another round, 2 or 3 weeks in Iran, isn't going to change the battlefield. It's only going to leave the American position that much weaker. Again, Fortress North America is wide open. You can bring everything back home, and we can defend this turf, and we can build beautiful things and do magical, majestic stuff. Pretty much at any point. I mean, there's going to be a rough road ahead, but the refocusing on North America, that is a game that we can start playing anytime. But I don't think he can take the L. And I don't know if it's pride. I don't know if it's just ego. You can explain it a lot of different ways. Maybe it's everything all at once. But I think in the end, we're going to have more war. I mean, the Iranian, he comes out and he says, oh, they begged me and we're close to a deal and we have a framework. And the Iranians all came out and said, none of that's true. Yet again, he's just lying. And they keep doing this. They keep saying Trump is full of it, because he is. He truly is completely full of wind when it comes to Iran. He's trying to bluff his way through this thing. And he's caught in a trap. Love is never having to say sorry. Love is never having to say sorry. I think I disagree with that one. I think love is knowing when you need to say sorry. I've said sorry to my wife a number of times, and I've apologized to my kids a number of times. Not even necessarily when I'm wrong, but just when I have to make a point. Generally with my wife, it's because I've done something stupid, and I just genuinely say I'm sorry, or, I ate the last of something she was saving. I say I'm sorry. With the kids, it's usually when I have to lay the law down. I got to get everybody straightened out. Because, you have this deal, in modern parenting, there's a lot of copy that says you're not supposed to yell at your kids or raise your voice at your kids. What we call yelling, raising your voice, getting loud with kids, the dad voice. And so I often say to the kids, I speak to you at a normal volume. And I say the same thing 2, 3, 4 times. I'll say it at a normal volume. And if you ignore me and you don't hear what I'm saying, I have to speak louder until you hear what I say and take action. And I'm sorry I got to do that. But somewhere between me speaking in a normal volume and you not listening, and me having to raise my voice so you listen, is this magical place where everybody just listens to everybody. So I disagree with this idea that you never raise your voice to your kids. Like, I don't know who wrote that. I don't know how you avoid it. I mean, when your 3-year-old is about to do something dangerous, this never happened to me, but like they're reaching for a hot element on the stove. You don't say, honey, please don't reach for the hot stove. Oh, you burned yourself. Okay. No, you yell, stop, like you yell. That's what you got to do. Anyway, I don't think love is exclusive to saying you're sorry. If I get to a comment where you clarify that one, Gene, I'll be happy to read it, but I don't agree with that. Trump doesn't give enough anymore. He's going to do whatever he wants to benefit himself. I don't even think he's benefiting himself any more. Oceanic feeling, 3135. None of this benefits him. It doesn't benefit his legacy. It doesn't benefit his presidency. It doesn't benefit his standing with the majority of Americans. It doesn't benefit his standing in the long run with the Republican Party. I don't think he's doing favors to himself. Trump never says sorry. No, he doesn't. And I think he's a fool for that. I do. I think he's a fool for that. He certainly has some things that maybe he doesn't have to say he's sorry over, but Project Warp Speed, the medical experiment, there's ways that he could atone for that without saying the word sorry that has the same meaning. See, look at this. Can you imagine where we'd be by now if Trump didn't win? Trump 2028. That's the end of the republic, dude. You can't run in 28 unless the Constitution doesn't mean anything. And where we'd be right now, if Trump didn't win, is pretty much the same place we're in because Kamala Harris was campaigning on this war and Trump was campaigning on preventing it. I made that point during the election that Kamala Harris, her policies vis-a-vis Ukraine and vis-a-vis the Middle East, if they were implemented, they were hers. But if they were implemented, would lead to World War III, which is pretty much where we're headed right now. We wouldn't be any different. The deficit is still out of control. $1 in $5 going towards the interest on the debt. No hope in sight. Epstein, all of his clients are still out there. How would it be different? I mean, okay, the border's closed and there's a crackdown on illegal immigration. Okay. There's been a bit of that. There's been a good amount of that. There needs to be a lot more of it. There's been a good amount of that. But that's like the only thing. One of the only positives. There's a few other things nibbling around the edges, but like it ain't all that great. And when you call for Trump 2028, what you're telling me is that Trump is more important than the Constitution. It's my privilege to disagree with you. The left and the right are all in on it. It's called political theater for a reason. Yeah. I mean, it certainly seems that way. Two wings of the same bird. And even the outlier parties and the smaller parties are oftentimes controlled opposition in their own way. It does seem contrived. I don't want to believe it. I don't want to accept it. I want to keep my mind open, my heart open, but this, I haven't even read it yet. Trump's second-term cabinet is all former never-Trumper neocons. Susie Wiles now ensures nobody with a good idea gets anywhere near the president. Man, buddy, amen, Egon. It's true. Go look up what Marco Rubio had to say about the president. Go look up what the late Lindsey Graham had to say about the president in 2016. They told the truth back then. They had their own separate truth that they told back then. And now they say a completely different story. And what's left of MAGA just applauds all these neocons in power everywhere. The woman that is his spiritual advisor at the White House, I like to think of her as a witch. I can't remember her name off the top of my head right now. Who was dating, oh my goodness, I can see his face, Benny Hinn, a former flame of Benny Hinn. Neocons everywhere. I thought during the first term, I justified it and made excuses for it when he brought in Pompeo and he had Mattis and he had all of these. He brought in John Bolton, and I'm just like, it's because he doesn't know. You get into office, you got to make 50-odd thousand appointments. He didn't think he was going to win. He doesn't really have a transition plan. And so like it was a lot of this finagling to get things out the door. And I really believed that this second term would be different because this time around, he's got the experience. He's been in the White House. He had the experience of what I genuinely believe the 2020 election was not fair. I tend to believe it was stolen. And my current feelings about his position in foreign policy and the mistakes that he's making now I'm not going to change the past unless I have to, unless the facts force me to change the past. I still think the 2020 election wasn't fair. I watched all the hearings. I read all the court documents. I read the affidavits. Like I didn't just focus on Rudy Giuliani's hair dye sweating down his face, which is what the media did. I actually listened to the substance of all the things that were presented. And I'm like, man, that looks dirty as hell. It's the same with everybody knows how I feel about the PPC and Max Bernier. Looking back, I don't think it's sincere. I don't think they're trying to build anything. I think it's a fundraising junket. I think it's something fake that occupies a space where something real can be, and it's a tragedy. But that doesn't change the fact that I remain convinced that the election of Andrew Scheer wasn't a fair one. I was there. I'm not an idiot. I read the body language of the people that were counting the votes. And when they came up on stage the night of the vote and they said, we're going to be shredding the ballots tonight, this guy was all tight. He was sweaty. They were taking too long to count. They said they were going to shred everything. Then the Conservative Party said the whole thing was audited. Deloitte came out and said it wasn't. Fishy as hell, just like the see-through envelopes and Stockwell Day and Stephen Harper. Okay, I'm not going to change my opinion on those things just because my opinion of the person and what they did afterwards is not as favorable. I think 2020 was the way it was. Coming back in 24, I thought he's got the experience. This time he's going to do it. He's going to name a bunch of people that he trusts. It's going to be different. And Marco Rubio comes in as state. I mean, I've often called him on X. I've often referred to him as Donald J. Bush because his foreign policy is indistinguishable from any neocon foreign policy I've ever seen before. And I actually think it's far worse. I think the damage is far worse than anything that's gone before. But we're in the middle of it. So, it's not over yet. Hi, Frank. See you in about 40 minutes. All right, Ron. What time was that? 3:02? Are you back, buddy? You in here? Because that was an hour ago. That's how far behind I am. Okay, so this is you now in the from. You now in the from 1925 to 1979, especially in the 60s and 70s, Iran was a Western style society. Oh, the revisionism. Does anybody know about the secret police under the Shah? Do you understand why the Iranian Revolution happened in the first place? Do you understand the Iranian Revolution in 79? When the Ayatollah came back from Europe, where he was in exile, that he was greeted by millions of people in the streets, wildly popular revolution that the Iranian people supported because the Shah was a tyrant, because his secret police were horrible. This revisionism. And then this popular revolution was subjected to a war from Iraq from 81 to 88, where the Americans were arming the Iraqis with chemical weapons and led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Iranians. People like to paint the Shah, this rosy picture that it was just this perfect bliss. It was good for friends of the Shah. It wasn't good for the Iranian people. That's why he got overthrown. And then people like to forget. You talk about 25 to 79. Do you know the name Mossadegh? Do you understand that Mossadegh wanted to take the oil back from the British and give the people a royalty to their own oil? He wanted to kick that British petroleum influence out. He wanted to restore power to the people. And he himself was booted from power and the Shah was installed. That's history. This rosy picture. That's just propaganda, bro. You are being a useful tool of a propaganda line that serves to justify the current bad position of the United States. And it sucks because it's historically completely illiterate. Edmonton police say God cannot hate evil anymore. Good luck dictating to God what he can do. Frank the Tank. People used to call me that when I was bullied back in public school, and I used to hate it. And now every time I see that term, I think back to that time, and I'm like, I should have embraced that. Like I didn't know when I was a kid, wearing the Coke bottle glasses and the teal corduroy pants that were too small for me, going to public school in South End, Oshawa, and having to fight every day just to keep my lunch. I didn't know how powerful a nickname that actually was. Maybe things would have been different if I had to just embrace the identity. Songbird McCain, yes. Bomb, 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 Iran. He'd be very happy, wouldn't he? Russia just activated 500,000 more troops on Wednesday. Smitty, always good to see you, man. I hope I never say anything that removes you from my chat, even if you think I'm wrong. I'm very familiar with your PFP. I look forward to it all the time. I read just about every one of your comments. I have a lot of respect for you. And yeah, Russia's not, they're not about to lose that war. They can't. They're not going to do it. It's an existential war for them, just as it's an existential war for the Iranians. Oh, man. I'm starting to get a headache. President Putin has around 70% approval rating. I think it's down from there, Bill. I'm not disagreeing. I think it's a little bit down from there, but it doesn't matter what the approval rating is. The Russian people, they want the war over, but they want it won first. And I think to the Western mind, maybe we don't quite understand the difference. They're sick of the war. They have high war fatigue, but they're not willing to lose it because it's an existential war in the minds of the Russian people. They have something very valuable, a cohesive society, ethnically, culturally, clean. There's a fella in the wintertime I was watching. He was, or is, I should say, can't remember his name, YouTube channel. Not a courier. What the hell would you call it? Not like an Uber guy, but he drove people between cities, and then he would live stream. He would live stream when he didn't have a passenger. So when he was driving back, he would live stream the thing, and he drove. And then on nights when he wasn't working, he was just driving around St. Petersburg, or he'd go to Moscow and drive around that city, or he'd go to some of the smaller cities and drive around those cities. And he's just streaming his drive. It's beautiful. No graffiti, no homeless people during Christmas. The lights, majestic, beautiful. The Russians are fighting for their existence from their perspective. Whether you agree or not doesn't matter. It's the same with the Iranians. You don't have to agree. That's how they see themselves, fighting for their existence. And as long as they see themselves that way, it's real. So if Putin's approval rating is falling, it's not because of the war itself. It's because he hasn't decisively won that war yet. They desire peace, but they desire victory first. Victory, then peace. I used to know how to say that in Russian because it's a phrase that's on the lips of the Russian people right now. This is something I learned by watching these people who just live stream and blog and do things. I mean, if you know where to look, you can see the real world online. You just have to know how to parse it and find it. You have to want it. You have to have a desire for more than your narrative that you want. You have to have a desire to figure out what is, regardless of what you want. You can have what you want, but you have to have that compartmentalized from your desire to find what is. And if you can do those things, then the internet is a vehicle to find what's real and what's not. Mouse just died. They can bring a Kurpan into a Good Life gym, apparently, and on a flight as well, if I'm not mistaken. Well, the Kurpan thing, the Good Life employee didn't get fired for asking for the removal. It's just wrong. Let's just stop there. It's just wrong. If I can't carry a knife in public, no one else should be able to. And if the Quebecois government can successfully ban headscarves and religious garb from their public service and from their policing, everybody else can do that too. Every province has the same ability to suspend the charter whenever the hell they want. You know, keeping people from being armed in gyms and other public places might be a good, reasonable use of the powers that, whether I like them or not, are enshrined in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for the government to just ignore them whenever they want. Might be a good idea. I don't know. Maybe a few more people need to get stabbed first before we figure it out. Tragically, this is why I live far from the city. IQ levels are directly proportional to success in Western societies. Yes, until DEI came along and put its fingers on the scales. And now we're supposed to believe that the great leveling of the playing field means that somebody with a low IQ, an abysmally low IQ, can do the same job as somebody with a high IQ. I don't know about that. This is an interesting one. Muslim values are Canadian values according to Carney. Well, it's what he says. But like what he says changes depending on the audience that he's speaking to. One thing I can tell you is that Muslim values are not compatible. Neither are Sikh values or a lot of the big immigrant communities that we are creating. We're not creating a melting pot. We're just creating ethnic enclaves in the cities all over the country. And a lot of these ethnic enclaves are not compatible with rainbow virtues and the idea of pride season and pride years and pride months and sodomy and hedonism and all of it. They're not compatible. They will not exist in the same space. And what I can tell you is those enclaves, they're having a lot more babies than the rainbow people are. And it's only a matter of time before they gain full political control. And the great dream, because even today, the last I checked, the Liberal Party on X still has a rainbow logo, even though it is August. So they're going for the pole pride season, signaling. And I predict that if things go the way they are now, if they continue on the trajectory that they're on, there won't be any rainbow flags anywhere on any public building in 40 years, maybe 50. That will be a thing of the past. But so will a lot of other things. X is the most free platform beside Facebook and YouTube, way more captured. Well, this is from a guy who is repeating party lines and stuff. It's a free platform, and as long as you want to go along with everything Trump is doing and you want to go along with Israeli foreign policy. You start questioning that, you're going to find out that it's no more free than Facebook and YouTube. And by the way, I find, because things change, time moves, things change. YouTube now, for me personally, is much more free and open than Twitter or Facebook. And that's by direct experience. Now, I know comments still disappear in the section. I'm not trying to say it's perfect, but I've experienced, my viewership might have gone down when I started talking about some of these subjects, but I think it's because a lot of people who are MAGA bots or just pro MAGA 100% didn't like it when I started telling the truth and honestly criticizing the Trump administration when it was making a big mistake going into Iran and other things that I've said. And I think some of the audience tuned out. That's fine. You guys can go. You can come back when you're done. When you figure it out, you can come back. I'll still be here. Other people won't. Promethean Action will disappear just like Q did, but I'll still be here. And I think that's fine. But like YouTube, I haven't detected the kind of overt algorithmic reach reduction that I have experienced on X since I started talking about these subjects. X is absolutely captured to the point that Grok will not just respond to questions when you ask a question, it will now engage in debate. So the AI, the official AI on the X platform, will engage with debate and argue with you all day if you want to. Even if you're right, it will promote the narrative because Grok is a beautiful thing. It's one of the best systems, but it is blatantly pro-Israel and it is very much pro-neocon. That's my experience. Last Ontario election, I voted New Blue. Good for you. I encourage anybody to vote for whoever they want. My days of telling people how to vote are long over. Only 7 countries allow foreign-born persons to hold elected office or positions of authority. Take a wild guess which one. Canada proud, man. Post-nationalism. Woo! Holy jumping. 3:30. There's so many comments I'm never going to get to. Frank, you should try to connect with Eva Bartlett. She has good info on Palestine, Israel conflict in Ukraine. She's Canadian on Substack. I'll try and remember to check that out. I don't know who she is. There's a lot of good people out there that I haven't met yet or seen. You know, I used to love hockey. Okay, still do, but not so much. Ron McLean gives me the nerds. Love you, Don Cherry. I love hockey as a sport. I think the actual game itself has never been in a better state. I hate the politicization of it. I hate it's right in your face. It's so political now. And I don't think I've watched a hockey game in a year and a half, which is a shame. I spent a lot of my I used to dream of having a son and watching hockey with my son. Like my dad and I used to watch hockey on the weekends. And it, I realized that what I loved about it was more than just the hockey. I loved being with my dad, so I spend time with my kids, and we don't have to watch hockey. I love the sport. I don't like the politics. And yeah, Don is the king of Saturday Night Hockey. May Hockey Night in Canada rest in pieces. I'm privileged to say that I made friends with Don after the incident happened with Ron McLean. We still follow each other on X. And I don't want to say that we're friends, like we don't talk every day or anything, but they did him wrong and they never made it right. He deserves a place in hockey history, a place of renown, and all he did was tell the truth. And I think everybody should be able to acknowledge at this point that he told the truth. I mean, the Remembrance Day parade that just went by last November, it's not just went by, man. We're going to be doing another one soon. But they did a Remembrance Day parade last November, streaming through the streets of Toronto, and there was a lot of people that were filming it from the buildings. No crowds, man. And I know from personal experience. You stand outside Union Station. I don't remember the name of the roads, but you stand, there's a corner right outside of Union Station. You pop up out of Union Station and you're right in the street. There's people walking everywhere. And through the month of November, maybe 1 in 100, 1 in 200 people have a poppy on. We forgot. We completely forgot. And it's a sad thing. Frank Vaughan, you should come to BC and you would see the insanity, or you would get the F out of here. Well, I lived in Ontario. I got the F out of there because I don't want to look at the insanity. I may need to look at it more. I've been thinking about that lately. I may need to go and see it more just so that I have a current visceral experience of it. But I'm not about to... lost my train of thought. Frank Vaughan for president. I don't qualify, Raymond. I'm not an American citizen, brother. Even if I did, they'd never let me. I would never get anywhere. Appreciate the endorsement, though. Fortress North America, thumbs up. Freedom of movement, work anywhere on the continent. Wouldn't it be beautiful, Smitty? Wouldn't it be beautiful? Visa-free travel, no border restrictions all around this continent. Why would you even want to go to Europe? Why would you want to go anywhere? You just do it here. You just do everything here. Oh, it's such a beautiful vision that has no competition for anything better, and I don't know why more people don't embrace it. Even as two distinct nations, I don't understand why it's so counter. It's self-harm to stand against the idea of our nations standing together. It is self-harming. It is self-sabotage. It makes so much sense. All right, folks. It's been 3 hours. It's been a good time. We should do it more. I appreciate so many of you tuning in. Like, 460 people watching steady for the last, I don't even know how long. I know there's channels out there that have 10 times the subs I do, and that's what they get for a live stream. I'm getting the same numbers they do. That's pretty cool. And we do it without monetization. We do it without advertising. We do it without any help from YouTube. It's all organic. It's all real. I'm real. One of the things I said to Brother Raymond the other day, because he was remarking that the internet is a world of fakery. Everything online is fake. I may be wrong. I may be right. I am imperfect. No baby about it. I am imperfect, but I'm real. And I really want to just figure out what's true. And that's what I try to do. And you can count on it. You can count on that authenticity for what it is. See you next time. Apparently, I got to click it again.